Let us pray. Almighty God, who in your infinite wisdom and providential goodness has appointed the offices of rulers and councils for the welfare of society and the just government of man, we beseech you to behold with your abundant favor us, your servants, whom you have been pleased to call to the performance of such important trusts in this country. Let your blessings descend upon us here in council assembled, and grant that we may, as in your presence, treat and consider all matters that shall come under our deliberation in so just and faithful a manner to promote your honor and glory and to advance the interest you have committed to our charge. All which we ask in the name and for the sake of our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Motions.
Just before I call on the mover of the motion to introduce the resolution, I would like to just make a statement on an observation I had overnight on Monday. And that is because certain documents relating to this resolution have been circulated directly to members, bypassing the clerk's office and without my prior authorization. I must remind all honorable members that under our standing orders, all official papers, evidence, or documents intended for consideration in our proceedings must be formally routed through the clerk to ensure accuracy, procedural fairness, and equal distribution. And because these specific documents have not been officially tabled, they have not been vetted or approved by the chair in accordance with our procedures, they do not form part of the official record. And for this, they will not be admitted, and they must not be referenced. Madam Clerk, let's proceed.
Motions.
I recognize the Honorable Romeo. And just to be clear, what I said just now is in reference to the documents circulated by email on Monday afternoon. The ones before are fine because they have been approved. Those circulated prior to the email are fine to be referenced.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, before I proceed, I'd like to use this opportunity to congratulate the many members of the Montserrat National Youth Parliament who in this very room were appointed to serve the young people in our country. Madam Speaker, I was so impressed by their eloquent, passionate, and persuasive statements, Madam Speaker, that, and especially when they spoke of wanting to get involved in the affairs of this country, I'm making a pledge here that as of this very assembly, this very motion placed today, I'll be sharing with them such information and consulting them to get their views and to see how best I could represent them. So I'm making that statement clearly now. So that Honourable Leader of the Opposition, I suppose as opposition we will all do the same thing in consulting them. Madam Speaker, the resolution I'm about to present is calling on the governments of Montserrat and the United Kingdom to take immediate and urgent action to address safety concerns associated with the Britten-Norman BN2 Islander aircraft and to ensure safe, affordable, reliable, and continuous day and night medical evacuation services for the people of Montserrat. Madam Speaker, the resolution reads as follows. Whereas timely medical evacuation and access to specialist health care are essential to protecting life, health, and the well-being of the people of Montserrat, whereas Montserrat's isolation and limited specialist health care services make air transportation essential for patients who need urgent medical treatments overseas, and whereas the suspension of night medical evacuation flights approximately 6 years ago left Montserrat without 24-hour emergency air evacuation service, placing residents and visitors at a greater risk during the hours of darkness. Whereas the risks created by the absence of night medical evacuation services have been known for many years and repeatedly brought to the attention of the governments and authorities of Montserrat and the United Kingdom, whereas practical solutions for restoring safe and sustainable night medical evacuation services have been identified and discussed for several years, and the cost involved have been publicly indicated to be known and relatively modest when compared to the risk of avoiding suffering, delayed treatment, or loss of life. Whereas before the John A. Osborne Airport was built, concerns were repeatedly raised that its location, short runway, and surrounding terrain could create safety, operational, medical, evacuation, transportation, and economic challenges, many of which continue to affect Montserrat today, and which the government of Montserrat and the United Kingdom that approved and implemented these decisions have a continuing responsibility to address. And whereas concerns have been raised about the operational limitations, performance, and safety margins of the Britten-Norman Islander aircraft serving Montserrat, including its performance in Montserrat's terrain and operating environment, obstacle clearance capability, payload restrictions, passenger capacity, and operation during emergencies. Whereas restoring and maintaining safe, reliable, affordable, adequate, resilient, and continuous day and night medical evacuation services requires careful consideration of the aircraft best suited to Montserrat's unique circumstances, including the airport, terrain, weather conditions, patient transport needs, passenger and cargo capacity, safety, operating cost, reliability, and long-term sustainability. And whereas patients and their families are often to accept responsibility for the cost of emergency medical evacuation and overseas specialist treatment, creating financial hardship and uncertainty at a time of medical crisis, whereas people in the United Kingdom are not normally required to provide financial guarantees or assume personal liability to receive equivalent emergency or medically necessary health care. Whereas the need for patients and families in Montserrat to bear or guarantee such costs result not from personal choice, but from limitations in local healthcare services and transportation access. Whereas the people of Montserrat are entitled to expect that issues affecting aviation safety, emergency healthcare, the protection of life, and access to essential public services will be treated as matters of the highest priority and urgency. And whereas this resolution does not seek to dictate technical solutions or commit specific expenditure, but simply recognizes that these concerns have been repeatedly raised, are matters of legitimate public interest, and require immediate and urgent attention. Now therefore be it resolved that this Honorable Assembly recognizes the restoration and maintenance of safe, reliable, accessible, affordable, and continuous day and night medical evacuation services as a matter of great urgency and national importance. and calls upon the governments of Montserrat and the United Kingdom, together with the governor of Montserrat and Air Safety Support International, to consider the need to urgently address the known safety and operational concerns associated with the British Norman BN-2 Islander aircraft serving Montserrat, and to identify, assess, and publicly report on the aircraft type or types capable of providing the highest practical levels of safety, reliability, affordability, adequacy, resilience, and operational suitability for Montserrat circumstances, including the provision of safe, continuous day and night medical evacuation services where feasible, and to give urgent consideration to the measures necessary to ensure such capability for the people of Montserrat. And B, calls upon the relevant authorities to consider publishing within a reasonable time a report and timetable setting out the actions proposed, the responsibilities of each organization, the funding arrangements, and the target dates for addressing these matters. Madam Speaker, I believe that this resolution is quite clear, especially for all of us who took the time to read carefully the documents that were circulated, as you said. And those who remember the discussions in this honorable House, answers to questions that I will remind you of today, which will actually teach us a lesson that answering with truth to questions, asking proper questions, makes a significant difference, because there comes a day when the questions and answers are going to be important in this room, just as it will be in a court of law. I'm hoping, and I'm learning a lot after my many years in Parliament, of the importance of truth in this House. And with that, I want to say before I continue that I dedicate this resolution largely to the Minister of Health, the Honorable Dr. Buffon, who, because of her truth in answering questions, allows me to stand here today and make a compelling argument to the people of Montserrat for urgent action that can save lives. And whatever the decision is made today, Madam Speaker, that truth still stands. Madam Speaker, I've shared all of these documents that have been shared with this House, with the media, international and local. I shared it with Montserratians at home and abroad. And Madam Speaker, as I said, I have shared it with one of the members of the Youth Parliament. I don't think you've had time to circulate it, but I will make sure to circulate it even more after this assembly. However, Madam Speaker, I know people are probably expecting an emotional and passionate speech. However, this decision today, the decisions today are going to be based on evidence. Evidence, not on my delivery or speech, but on evidence. Evidence that we should be all aware of. The resolution addresses two closely related matters of national importance. One, concerns regarding the safety, performance, and operational suitability of the British Norman BN-2 Islander aircraft serving Montserrat. Did you hear that? It's going to address concerns regarding the safety, performance, and operational suitability of the British BN-2 Islander aircraft serving Montserrat. And two, the need to restore and maintain safe, reliable, affordable, and continuous day and night medical evacuation services for the people of Montserrat. Let's first deal with the concerns regarding the safety, performance, and operational safety of the Islander aircraft, the seven-seater that we all fly on. And before I even say a word, Madam Speaker, there is no question that the government of Montserrat, Her Excellency the Governor and ASI, have been working towards getting a suitable aircraft for night medevac purposes. There's no question. They must have. But please note, the resolution is A, calling on the governments of Montserrat and United Kingdom, together with the governor of Montserrat and ASI, to consider the need to act with greater urgency to address. Did you hear that? To act with greater urgency than has been expressed so far. That's what we're discussing today. Acting with greater urgency. To address, one, the known safety and operational concerns associated with the seven-seater Islander aircraft serving Montserrat. And I have to ask the question, because I'm sure Honorable Dorset Hector and others, especially Honorable Dorset Hector, will be able to tell us whether a decision has been made as to the appropriate aircraft that will be used for medevac services. I'm quite sure by now they should have addressed that. I am told, and I'm making it plain here, that the very same British Norman BN2 Islander aircraft that we're using now is the one that's being considered. I was told that just a few months ago by a representative of the FCDO, the governor's office. But I said the governor's office, who apparently is leading on the issue of getting night medevac in some way. I don't have any official documents to say so, but I was told so. And I was told that the aircraft being considered, still being considered then when he told me, was the same British Norman BN2 Islander aircraft. And then the second part that needs to be addressed is to identify, assess, and publicly report on the aircraft type or types capable of providing the highest practicable levels of safety, reliability, affordability, and the rest of what I've explained. To identify, assess, and publicly report on the aircraft type or types capable of providing the highest practical levels. That gives people confidence that a solution is underway. And, Madam Speaker, to give urgent consideration to the measures to ensure such capability for the people of Montserrat. That's the first section. So let's try and deal with that. What's the evidence you've received, Madam Speaker? Madam Speaker, the Minister of Build confirmed in this Assembly, December 25, 2025, that nighttime medevac was suspended in November 2019 by the Governor of Montserrat following regulatory advice from ASI for the following reasons. Nighttime medevacs, and I'm quoting her, nighttime medevacs were suspended because the Governor's instructions did not permit night operations, and the aviation regulator ASI advised that the BN2 Islander did not have the performance margin required for safe night performance. Approval for night operations would have required an acceptable safety case addressing aircraft performance, obstacle clearance, lighting, and emergency procedures, which was not available at the time. That's 6 years ago. Madam Speaker, in summary, the Minister's response indicates that the night medevac services was discontinued because the Islander did not provide acceptable margin for night departures. Did you hear that, Madam Speaker? And the existing regulatory framework did not permit night operations. Two things. The performance of the aircraft and the existing regulatory framework did not permit night operations. She also stated that restoring the services requires regulatory approval, a satisfactory safety case, appropriate aircraft capability, infrastructure upgrades, and operational readiness. Again, I would expect that in the past 6 years, all of this has been worked on, especially since 3 years ago when we had that access public hearing committee in this very building, where some serious matters were raised. Madam Speaker, in another sitting, the minister stated that Class A aircraft, such as the D8C-6 Twin Otter, the D8C-6 Twin Otter offer improved climb out performance and are generally better suited to operations from short runways, and it could be considered along with twin-engine helicopters, which represent an alternative for night medical evacuations. I'm quoting the Honorable Minister for Build here. And by the way, the Twin Otter can carry more than one patient, maybe in a medevac, maybe up to 3. If you have a mass casualty, if you have an accident between 2 cars, 2 passengers in 1 car, or passengers in each car could be injured. If you can only carry 1, then what do you do? If it's a mass casualty beyond 2, my. So clearly, the Minister for Build has identified an aircraft and that helicopters, twin-engine helicopters, Madam Speaker. You notice we've been receiving luggage in the past years from a helicopter in Antigua when the small aircraft have problems bringing baggages back to Montserrat. They used to carry passengers. But after I wrote a letter to the minister in the UK asking whether they're allowed to carry passengers with a 1-engine helicopter, I don't see them bringing in people anymore. Just what I noticed. Maybe somebody can tell me different. Maybe charters, but not passengers for the general public travel. So it needs to be a twin-engine helicopter, I believe, because you don't want the helicopter to create another emergency. And Madam Speaker, the Honourable Minister of Build went on to describe this in greater detail, all the detailed things that need to be addressed. So it's not just choosing an aircraft, there's much more to be done. But like I said, since 6 years ago, since 3 years ago with the Access Committee hearing here, since we've been asking questions in this Parliament repeatedly over the past year, since questions are being asked in the Parliament in UK over the past year regarding medevac in Montserrat, certainly much would have been done to advance this work. Madam Speaker, in the November 2025, the Honourable Minister of Build stated that it would cost approximately £870,000, excluding civil engineering, risk, and project management costs, to install runway lighting and other necessary facilities to enable night landing capability at the John A. Osborne Airport. Madam Speaker, I'm hearing that lights were purchased and progress has been made in that regard. As I said, there's no question that work is being done. However, Madam Speaker, let me go to 3. I want to refer to, no, I'll do it here. I note that I prepared, it was shared with Assembly prior to now, shared with the previous government. It came out of the Access Committee hearing in this very room in 2023, December, somewhere between October, December 2023, when that hearing was heard. That's nearly 3 years ago. I produced a report that dealt with safety. The committee may not have provided a report for the general findings, but I provided something for safety because I realized how important that was. I provided it and I shared it with the Assembly, made it public. I wrote to the minister in the UK, shared it with him, raised the concerns many times since 2024, 2025. And in that report, if you would have received this, there's a section where Mr. Gravel, who is the manager, owner of SVG, and I'm quoting, considers that the piston engine islanders are inherently unsafe for Montserrat's short strip between valleys. He's referring to the islander, with hills on both sides leading to crosswinds, and with a hill just beyond the takeoff end. Loss of an engine on takeoff could become a critical incident. He regards the situation as an accident waiting to happen. Madam Speaker, he didn't say at night alone. He's referring to day as well. We're dealing with night medevac here, day and night. Okay, he went on to say, and I quote what was said in that document, his pilots are also concerned that he has problems with the pilot retention, that's keeping his pilots, as they fear that cumulative exposure to the safety hazards increases probability of accident. One fear here is losing an engine on takeoff with the Islander, which could cause several possible ways to have an accident. Madam Speaker, I'm quoting documents that were shared several times. Madam Speaker, do you realize the gravity of what I've just read? Well, that's one of the decisions we have to make today. Madam Speaker, I'm taking my time because you said I can't quote certain things. So, let me go on. I was most touched, Madam Speaker, when, let me make sure because I have to be careful what documents I'm referring to. When I looked and reminded myself of the answers given by Dr. Buffon in February 25 in LegCo, which, Madam Speaker, all of us were present to have heard. So I would be, clearly those would be available for anyone to vet and know that they're genuine, the claims I'm about to make. Honorable Dr. Buffon, please tell me if I'm telling the truth. Let me read a few statements made by Dr. Buffon. The barriers to achieving timely medical evacuation have been as follows. The primary problems have been failure to have patients accepted by an appropriate tertiary facility nearby. Let me repeat. The primary problems have been failure to have patients accepted by an appropriate tertiary facility nearby, combined with marked limitations in arranging emergency travel off island. So getting facilities nearby and arranging the medivacs both day and night, not just at night. Madam Speaker, she went on to say that most staffed and equipped medical evacuation aircraft, I hope you're noting, Dr. Buffon, to tell me if I'm telling the truth. Most staffed and equipped medical evacuation aircraft, because of their specifications, are not allowed to travel to the island because of ASI regulations.
Honorable Romeo, just a second. What document are you reading
Madam
from?
Speaker, I am quoting for myself from what was said in this Parliament and surrounding Parliament before. That's what I'm doing. Good. And Dr. Buffon can confirm. Yes. Yes. So, you threw me off there, Madam Speaker. That's okay. So, are you saying, Dr. Buffon, that there are specialized medevac planes that are not allowed to come to Montserrat because of regulations? And would that make a difference if that were possible? Are the ones that we use now equipped to take people to Antigua, Madam Speaker? That's another question. Honorable Lewis, was the one you traveled into Antigua equipped? These are very serious questions, and they should not have to come to this assembly. They should have been addressed. Madam Speaker, I'm like a dog that kept barking, warning about trouble, and nobody would listen. So the dog eventually had to bite. This should not have to happen. I'm using general terms. Madam Speaker, in the Bible it speaks about the watchman on the wall. If the watchman doesn't warn of danger and it leads to bloodshed, the watchman will be held responsible for the bloodshed. And if the watchman tells people and they don't do anything, they will be responsible for the bloodshed, Madam Speaker. So, Madam Speaker, I have a duty to do what I'm doing here. And I'm hoping that when a decision is made today, it's based on what those youth parliamentarians said, and I have one, I'm going to come back to that. This is what we're here to do today. This is a conscience vote. This is a vote on evidence. This is a vote to save lives. not a party thing here today, Madam Speaker. She went on to say, Madam Speaker, as a result of some time-critical emergencies, patients can become trapped on the island depending on what time of day they present. Madam Speaker, she said, going forward, we expect flexibility with these rules, and she's referring to regulatory rules, I guess, from ASI. But we don't want flexibility that leads to any harm. We want safe rules no matter what. So any flexibility must maintain safety as a priority. So she's looking for flexibility. She went on to say, unfortunately, recent failed medical evacuations have occurred during normal daytime hours because the accepting facility was too far away to allow transfer by our local airline within a few hours. Madam Speaker, day or night? If this is happening in the day, can you imagine what will happen at night? You lose a few hours in the day, then you have to wait overnight till the next day to address urgent trauma cases. Madam Speaker, Dr. Doublefung, when you stand, please explain to the public, better than Don can, what this really means. Then, Madam Speaker, she said, it is essential that we press on to get a solution. No one knows when the next stroke, heart attack, or major trauma will occur, and we must be prepared. Madam Speaker, the reason why I'm dedicating this press release to Honorable Dr. Buffon is because she has a passion for medical care. She doesn't want one single person to die. And I challenge anybody out there. She has been totally devoted prior to becoming elected, since being elected, when not elected, and now being re-elected to the same cause. She doesn't need to be here. Thank God she went out and got a lot of experience and have come back. We cannot pay Honorable Dr. Buffon for the work she has done for the people of Montserrat. And Madam Speaker, not just her, the nurses, doctors, the orderlies, and all of those involved in Medivac, the stress of having to deal with, do we move people now? When are we going to get them out? How do we keep them alive? But Madam Speaker, she said, if we are unable to make Medivac patients, between 6 p.m. and 6 a.m., that means that half the time patients with life-threatening conditions are trapped on this island. And she goes on. That is 182 days in total per year. 365 nights is 182 days per year that you cannot evacuate people to medical safety. Very often in time-critical cases, she says, you only have a window of a few hours. And this restriction will result in death and disability if we are not able to get stroke patients to a facility on time. So there's death and disability, harm that can be life-threatening. You could be immobilized for years, alive, but immobilized. Honorable Dr. Buffon, please tell the public if what I'm saying here is true. And the main thing, Honorable Dr. Buffon, is how urgently we need to act.
Please address the chair,
yes,
and not the member directly.
Madam Chair, 2 days ago in this assembly, the Honorable Premier decided that he had to leave to go to CARICOM. He had cabinet, then he had to leave for CARICOM yesterday. And the meeting is on Sunday. He probably has other meetings before then. And I tried to make sure that he was here. that he will be here to lead on this matter. But he has left it for Honorable Dawson Hector to do.
Honorable Romeo, he had to go, he had to
I'm
go.
making a point. No,
Don't say he left it to Honorable
Yes, he's
Minister.
placed responsibility on the deputy leader, who is very capable, Madam Speaker, of handling this matter. The point I wanted to make, Madam Speaker, the reason why I'm raising that is that Dr. Buffon had already provided a solution that the Premier said he's going to address when he comes back around the 11th of this month. Is that what he said? That's how many days from now? 10 days from now? Well, this is the solution that Dr. Buffon provided. The only solution for Montserrat's time-critical emergencies is Guadeloupe, approximately 20 minutes away, with first-class facilities for the management of strokes, heart attacks, and major trauma. Madam Speaker, I would hope that the Honourable Premier is going over there to use his persuasiveness to influence the Guadeloupean authorities to provide the services of their helicopter, the twin-engine helicopter. I think they have military helicopters. I'm told by a pilot that their helicopters went into another island to do a medevac for another country in darkness wherever they went. They had infrared visual aid, and they have a well-equipped aircraft, twin engine, went in to do a medevac. It's sitting over there. Madam Speaker, I'm addressing you. Madam Speaker, don't you think that Guadeloupe, I met the leaders myself, don't you think that they can be persuaded to provide that helicopter until we get night medevac in place? Don't you think it would help, Madam Speaker? Madam Speaker, should he be waiting 10 days to do that? That's my question. Should he have gone since February 2025, Madam Speaker? I'm being very direct here. The Minister for Health has been talking about an MOU, Madam Speaker. So, Madam Speaker, so the issue here is not that something is not being done. The question is, can lives be lost while we wait? And is there something we can do now to save those lives? That's what the decision is about today. Isn't there something we can arrange? Madam Speaker, I myself did some investigation since last year when I went to England. Spoke to companies, got estimates to put in lights for the airport. They told me how quickly it could be done. Madam Speaker, if you're waiting on regulatory issues, get the lights in. That's nearly 7 months ago that I contacted them. It's more than a year, more than 3 years since the access meeting, Madam Speaker. I'm not blaming anyone, but I'm laying out the facts because we need to decide, are we going to do the same as what was done 6 years ago? Because the essential question, before I forget the point, is what should those who made the decision to stop night medevac do from the moment they decided in this, was it? December 19, 2019, 6.5 years ago. The minute you made that decision, and I'm quite sure they were aware that death and harm would come as a result of not having night medevac. I'm confident that they were aware of that. I'm confident that local people made the case to them, look, if we stop night medevac, people are going to die and get hurt. So what should the response have been? Madam Speaker, believe it or not, that's the same response that we need to make today, 6.5 years later, the same one made then. Madam Speaker, when the assembly ended the other day, I spoke to a pastor and asked him about night medevac. And he tried to find out what the resolution was about. I gave him an idea. So I asked him, what if you decide to stop night medevac? What should you do? What should the authorities do? He said, put something in place ASAP. I said, what do you mean by ASAP? 3 months? He said, days. Short time, as short as possible. That is what this decision is about today. I asked a fisherman. The fisherman said to me, the document that I circulated, I sent it to him. And the fisherman said to me, Don, you need to push this because we need to know, we need to have a time frame for action. He said 6 months ago, the governor came on the radio and promised something. Dr. Buffon came in February and reassured. And he said there needs to be some clear, defined time frame, just like the project, like the port project. You can't just go on and on. The hospital project does not go on and on. Madam Speaker, I'm making my point. I have to deal with this. I see you ready to press the button. But Madam Speaker, so the authorities then needed to make that decision, in my view, and we need to make a decision here today. Same decision. So let's go back to Dr. Buffon. I think what she's been asking is, should an immediate memorandum of understanding have been negotiated with an operator to provide more suitable fixed-wing aircraft or helicopter? That's what she's asking. That's what she's been pushing for. Should assistance have been requested from the UK government, including the Royal Air Force and other UK, sorry, I'm having a throat problem. Other UK military assets? Did you hear that? Should assistance have been requested from the UK government, including the Royal Air Force and the other UK military assets? They've been around, they come all the time to do studies. We know their capability. They can put in night medevac in days if they want to, right here. They can provide a twin-engine helicopter within days if the British government wants to. They could hire one if it exists in the region within days. They could make an arrangement with the Guadeloupe government within days. We could have an announcement on the radio in 2 days. I guarantee you the French government, I put my money on the table. I don't gamble, I'm Adventist, you're not supposed to gamble. But Madam Speaker, yeah, 2 of us don't gamble. Madam Speaker, but, Madam Speaker, going back to the point I was raising with the Honourable Premier, I know he has to go to a serious meeting, but Madam Speaker, I am hoping that when this assembly is finished, that he will send Honourable Osborne and Dr. Buffon to Guadeloupe. Don't wait 10 days. Send them, they're capable. She can handle the medical side of it. Honourable Osborne, the great negotiator, based on the evidence, he presents this evidence to the Guadeloupe people to explain what we're saying here. I guarantee you, a helicopter will be provided in no time. And all of the people in Guadeloupe will be cheering, help out our neighbors. You never know. We can have an eruption too and need help one day. Madam Speaker, I believe I'm making the point. No prepared speech, Madam Speaker, just providing the points, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I just want to share one more thing. Let me hope that's the last. Madam Speaker, I took the time to do some research. Thanks for AI. I did a study on a crash that took place in Glasgow, Scotland somewhere, I think.
And I ask you not to make reference to those.
I'm not making reference to the document. I'm making reference to what I've done and what I've found, Madam Speaker. Not a document, what Don Romeo has done. So in getting those 2 documents, the report on what happened in Glasgow, a journalist referred me to this. He warned me I needed to share this with the public here. And I took a study of the accident that took place in Antigua in 2001. Remember that one? Where on takeoff, the islander lost an engine because water got into the engine.
Honourable Romeo, no. Those documents are among the documents I told you not to refer to.
I'm not referring to the documents, Madam Speaker. I'm speaking of reference to an incident that took place. I'm allowed to speak about...
Honourable Romeo, you're trying to manipulate the situation here. No.
Madam Speaker, you're saying that I cannot speak to them about an incident that took place in Antigua that's relevant to what's happening now? And
it is speaking to the documents that you circulated.
Madam Speaker,
without
I'm not using the
authorization.
documents. I'm not quoting the documents. I'm speaking out my head. I could close my eye and speak.
Well, and I rule that you do not make reference to them. Sorry.
Madam Speaker, your ruling is final. However, Madam Speaker, the issue then, let me make it plain, is that this is the challenge that many people do not know. It's sad that it has to reach this stage. On takeoff from Montserrat, should the Islander lose an engine, based on what ASI has warned us, the plane may not be able to take it over the hill. Doesn't have the performance, may not. And from what I've learned from the Access Committee report here, it may not be able to turn around and land. Unlike in Antigua, the plane that crashed had a wonderful flat airport. So it couldn't, to turn around. You had seawater in front. We have a hill in front, gully to the left and right, valley in front of us, nowhere to turn. Madam Speaker, so Montserrat's situation is the worst of the lot. So should that happen, it can't return and land, it may not be able to raise itself high enough to then go on to Antigua, Madam Speaker, he has to crash. That is what the gentleman, the owner of SVG, referred to earlier. So I'm making it clear. This is the environment that we're dealing with. A short runway, challenging surrounding terrain, limited emergency options. We don't even have a well-equipped rescue team to go down in the gut, or go anywhere to pick up people. We also don't have a proper hospital on Dr. Buffon. And that is why, Madam Speaker, don't say that. You can't be kidding.
You're talking to the Honorable.
Yes, she's talking to me. Madam Speaker.
Okay, Honorable members, don't talk across the floor.
If we did, Madam Speaker. No. I'm sorry, Madam Speaker. I think she made me wrong. I'm just saying we don't have the advanced facilities to take care of the traumatic cases. That's what I'm saying. That's why they're going to Antigua. That is why they're going to Antigua, because of the traumatic situation. I think she misunderstood what I'm saying. So, Madam Speaker, anyway, so I think I made my point. I think I've made my point. Sorry, there's misunderstanding there. Madam Speaker, there's one other thing I need to refer to that was shared. It has to do with cost. The resolution says that the people of Montserrat were not responsible for the choice of airport, were not responsible for not having night med evacuation, not having specialist care. It's not our fault. It's not the governor's fault. It's not anybody's fault that we don't have specialist care on Montserrat. As much as we need. We could do it some more. It's kind of difficult with the population we have. But we need access to specialist care. Madam Speaker, so I went as far as to share information with the Secretary of State, with an MP in London, similar information that I'm sharing here, and he asked the Secretary of State for Health and Social Care what discussions he has had with the government of Montserrat regarding the requirement that patients accept full financial liability for medical costs and overseas medical. Sorry, Madam Speaker, the AC is drying up my throat. I can't even. It's really drying me up. Let me reread that. This is his question: to ask the Secretary of State and Social Care what discussions he has had with the government of Montserrat regarding the requirements that patients accept full financial liability for medical costs and all overseas medical expenses prior to emergency evacuation, and whether this policy is consistent with UK support to the territory's health budget and obligations under Article 73 of the Charter. This is his answer, Madam Speaker. The answer that the FCDO minister gave, Dr. Zubir Ahmed, Labour, Glasgow, he's from Glasgow, Southwest. He said, the Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office provides budget support to the government of Montserrat. Specific healthcare budget allocations are a matter for the government of Montserrat. The United Kingdom government fulfills all its responsibilities under Article 73 of the United Nations Charter to promote the political, economic, social, and educational advancement of the overseas territories. Did you hear that, Madam Speaker? In his answer to the question as to what he's doing to support the health budget on Montserrat, to address the expenses put on families, to commit to paying bills in tens of thousands, sometimes 100,000, 200,000, 300,000. They have to sign before, to commit before they travel. Or sometimes another member who is more conscious has to sign. And his answer was, the Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office provides budget support to the government of Montserrat. So he's saying we give them money. Specific healthcare budget allocations are a matter for the government of Montserrat. So it's up to the government of Montserrat to decide how they spend the money. Then he says the United Kingdom fulfills all its responsibilities under Article 70 of the United Nations Charter to promote the political, economic, social, and educational advancement of those. Did you hear that? He's saying they provided all their responsibilities. They're fulfilling all of their responsibilities, and they've given money for us to address the healthcare needs. But, Madam Speaker, if you were to lastly look at what Dr. Vokfong presented in another assembly regarding the cost, she said the other day it could cost $10,000, $5,000 to $10,000 to go to Antigua alone. It could cost $60,000 to go on to Trinidad. Sometimes you have to get a plane from here to Antigua because the plane is not allowed to land here or is not capable of landing here, to take them the longer distance that the small plane can't go. So it's $10,000 to Antigua, then $60,000 to Trinidad. When 20 minutes away is a facility that is probably better than the one in Trinidad, Madam Speaker. And we used to use them before. What the minister is saying, by saying that he provides all or fulfills all of his responsibilities for health, education, for political, economic, social, and educational advancement, that's what he's saying, as under the Treaty of the United Nations. He's also saying that he's provided the funds to do so, and that they're being fulfilled. I'll leave it at that. Madam Speaker, in the United Kingdom, I know somebody who had knee replacement just 2 weeks ago. That's about £17,000, just the knee replacement alone, not to mention the other care. A Montserrat, pacemaker, £15,000. That's about 52,000 on Rasban. $80. I know of a mother and father who had the case where a child was being born outside of the womb. It's possible, you know. Formed outside of the womb. Had to travel to England to get medical care. And I forgot how many £100,000 it cost. A lot of money over time. I forgot the figure. 1,000 EC, I forgot. It's a lot of money. And that's more than 10, 15 years ago. More than 15 years ago. The British government is spending significant funds to help Montserrats in the United Kingdom. They are fulfilling their obligations in UK to Montserrats. So, Madam Speaker, the question is, how are we going to get the British government to fulfill the same obligations that the Honourable Minister, Dr. Bufang, has been arguing for over and over? How are we going to get that done? How are we going to get that done? When together we make a strong statement, as we will do today, or we should do today, to say to the Governor, the Honourable Premier, to Cabinet, to say to the UK government, Governor and ASI, let's unite and address the challenges we face that will save lives, avoid harm, do the same for the people of Montserrat that's done in the United Kingdom, with greater urgency. Madam Speaker, that is what we're here to decide today, and I'm going to allow everyone the chance to say their piece and let us know where they stand on this matter. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Do we have someone second? I recognize the Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I rise to second the motion for the resolution. Knight Medivac. Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, if you would permit me, I'd like to make a contribution on the resolution. Yeah, Madam Speaker, I have a little competition with a noisy truck on the outside there, so just a minute. Thank you. Madam Speaker, I rise today to offer my full support for the resolution so aptly, Madam Speaker, moved by my colleague, the Honourable Member, Donaldson Romeo. Madam Speaker, this resolution is not about politics, at least not in my opinion. It is not about assigning blame. It is about protecting lives. It is about ensuring that every man, woman, child, resident, and visitor to Montserrat can have confidence that when a medical emergency arises, our island has a safe, reliable, and continuous means of getting critically ill patients to the specialist care they need. Madam Speaker, one medical emergency can change the life of a family forever. Madam Speaker, when someone suffers a heart attack, a stroke, severe trauma, pregnancy complications, or another life-threatening condition, time is everything. Minutes matter. Delays cost lives. Yet for years, our people have lived with the knowledge that if such an emergency occurs at night, the options available are severely limited. That is not something any community should have to accept as normal. The resolution recognizes a reality that many families have experienced personally, that nighttime medical evacuation has been unavailable for approximately 6 years, despite repeated concerns being raised and practical solutions being discussed. Madam Speaker, healthcare is not simply about hospitals and doctors. It is also about access. For Montserrat, Madam Speaker, air transportation is an essential part of our healthcare system. Without dependable air access, our healthcare system cannot fully serve our people because many specialized medical services simply are not available on island. This resolution, therefore, correctly treats transportation and emergency healthcare as inseparable. I also wish to commend the mover because he has taken a balanced approach in the resolution. The resolution does not attempt to prescribe a particular aircraft as a solution. It does not instruct aviation professionals how to perform their duties. Instead, it asks that the relevant authorities urgently assess the safety, operational suitability, affordability, and long-term sustainability of the aircraft serving Montserrat and report publicly on their findings. That is a reasonable request. If experts conclude that the present arrangements provide the highest level of safety, then let the evidence demonstrate that. If improvements are required, then let improvements be made. Public confidence grows when decisions are transparent and supported by evidence. Madam Speaker, this resolution also reminds us of another important principle. Montserrat is a British overseas territory. our people are British citizens. At least, Madam Speaker, we do carry British passports. The resolution notes that residents of the United Kingdom are generally not expected to provide financial guarantees before receiving medically necessary emergency health care, while many Montserratians face financial uncertainty during medical crises because of our geographical isolation and limited local services. This is not about seeking special treatment. It is about seeking equitable treatment. No citizen should feel that where they live determines whether they can receive timely emergency medical care. Madam Speaker, I also appreciate that this resolution recognizes the shared responsibilities involved. It calls upon the government of Montserrat, United Kingdom government, the governor, and the aviation authorities to work together. This is exactly the kind of issue that requires partnership rather than division. Our people are not interested in jurisdictional arguments. They simply want to know that when a loved one needs urgent care, the system will respond. Finally, Madam Speaker, this resolution asks for something that should never be controversial. It asks for accountability. It requests a published report, a timely table for action, clear responsibilities, and transparency regarding funding and implementation. Surely, our people deserve to know what is being done, who is responsible, and when improvements can reasonably be expected. Madam Speaker, every member of this Honorable House, regardless of political affiliation, has constituents, Madam Speaker, who may one day depend on emergency medical evacuation. Madam Speaker, I am an example that any member of this legislature can also require emergency evacuation. Madam Speaker, illness does not recognize party colors. Emergencies do not distinguish between government supporters and opposition supporters. This resolution is about protecting every person who calls Montserrat home. I therefore commend the Honorable Romeo for bringing this important matter before the House and urge every honorable member to support this resolution unanimously in the interest of public safety, public confidence, and above all, the preservation of human life. Madam Speaker, in closing, I want to add to the conversation the importance of using aircrafts that are equipped with standard medical equipment to support the patient during medevac. Madam Speaker, this is not necessarily the case as we debate this issue today. It means certain critically ill patients do not have access to an aircraft with adequate medical equipment on board. This can determine the difference between life and death. Even without adequate medical equipment on board the aircraft, as we stand presently, Madam Speaker, the cost range of medevac at approximately 10,000 round trip Antigua-Montserrat or 60,000 to Trinidad is much too expensive for the average citizen and resident of Montserrat. Madam Speaker, Montserrat deserves better. The citizens and residents of Montserrat deserves better. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you.
I recognize the Honorable Malkia.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I rise today to give my full support and to further reinforce the points already raised to the resolution brought by the Honorable Romeo entitled Calling on the Governments of Montserrat and the United Kingdom to take immediate and urgent action to address safety concerns associated with the Britain-Norman BN-2 Islander aircraft and to ensure safe, affordable, reliable, and continuous day and night medical evacuation services for the people of Montserrat. Madam Speaker, there are occasions when politics must give way to principle, and when party differences must give way to the protection of human life. This, I must say, is one such occasion. I also agree that this resolution is not about scoring political points. This resolution is also about national resilience. We are an island that has lived through volcanic eruptions, hurricanes, tropical storms, and other emergencies. We know all too well that disasters do not wait for daylight. A resilient country is one that prepares before emergencies occur, not after tragedy strikes. A modern emergency medical evacuation system is therefore not simply a healthcare issue. It is an essential component of national security, disaster preparedness, and public safety. Our emergency response systems must be capable of operating whenever the need arises, whether noon or at midnight. It is about whether someone suffering a heart attack at midnight has the same chance of survival as someone who becomes ill at midnight. It is about whether a mother experiencing complications during childbirth, a child requiring urgent specialist treatment, or an elderly person suffering a stroke should have to wait until daylight before receiving the emergency care they desperately need. No society should ever accept that the time on the clock determines whether someone lives or dies. Madam Speaker, the resolution before us is measured, responsible, and reasonable. It does not instruct engineers what aircraft to purchase. It does not direct aviation regulators how to perform their duties. And it certainly does not appropriate money. Instead, it asks that governments of Montserrat and the United Kingdom urgently examine the known issues, publicly report on them, and put in place a clear plan to restore safe, reliable, and continuous medical evacuation services. Surely, no reasonable member of this honorable House could oppose to that objective. Madam Speaker, what makes this debate particularly compelling is that many of the concerns raised in this resolution are not speculation. They have already been acknowledged by government itself. Let me once again highlight, in previous responses to questions before this honorable House, the minister responsible for BUILD confirmed that nighttime medevac services ceased in November 2019 after regulatory advice from ASI and because the governor's instructions permit only daytime operations under visual meteorological conditions. The minister further confirmed that the BN2 Islander did not possess the performance margins required for safe night departures and that approval would require an acceptable safety case. Those are not opposition claims, Madam Speaker. They are official government responses. Madam Speaker, equally significant was the response from the Honourable Minister of Health when asked why patients must assume financial responsibility for overseas medical treatment and medevac costs. The minister frankly acknowledged, and I commend her for her honesty, that if government cannot afford those costs, one must ask, how can ordinary people? She further recognized that this concern is especially relevant for children and elderly persons. Madam Speaker, that statement should cause every one of us to pause and think. Medical emergencies do not discriminate. We have seen the proof in the pudding of the esteemed leader of the opposition and his testimony just a few months ago. So we all know what certainly can happen to everyone. We all know cancer does not ask whether someone has insurance. A stroke does not ask whether a family can raise thousands of dollars overnight. An accident victim does not choose whether the emergency occurs at 2 o'clock in the afternoon or 2 o'clock in the morning. Healthcare should never depend upon one's bank balance. Madam Speaker, this resolution is equally about fairness and equity. Every resident of Montserrat contributes to this country through taxes, work, volunteerism, and community service. They should therefore have confidence that when a medical emergency arises, that geography does not become a barrier to survival. Residents of Montserrat should not receive a lower standard of emergency access simply because we live in a small British overseas territory. Every life has equal value. Every patient deserves the same urgency. Every family deserves the reassurance that every reasonable measure has been taken to protect those they love. Madam Speaker, the government has also acknowledged that restoring night operations requires a number of technical measures. And I reinforce, these include upgraded runway lighting, replacement of constant current regulators, improvements to the air traffic control lighting systems, enhanced rescue and firefighting capability, updated manuals, revised governor's instructions, and the approval of ASSI following satisfactory safety assessments. Importantly, government has also informed this Honourable House that work has already begun, including establishing a working group, obtaining technical guidance from ASSI, reviewing infrastructure, obtaining quotations for equipment, and working with Manchester Airports Group. Madam Speaker, this resolution is also fundamentally about accountability. As members of this Honourable House, one of our primary responsibilities is oversight. Our role is not to tell engineers how to design aircraft, nor regulators how to certify airports. Our duty is to ensure that government agencies are addressing known risks, making measurable progress, spending public funds responsibly, and reporting transparently to the people they serve. In this regard, I welcome the fact that government has indicated that work is already progressing. This resolution simply asks that such work continue with urgency, be properly coordinated, and be reported publicly so that the people of Montserrat can see the progress being made. Madam Speaker, if work is already underway, then surely this resolution strengthens, not weakens, strengthens that work. It provides parliamentary support. It demonstrates national consensus. It signals that this House considers restoration of safe medevac capability to be a national priority. Madam Speaker, I must say that the United Kingdom also has an important role. The documents before us show that the UK government has stated that aviation safety in Montserrat falls within UK responsibility through Air Safety Support International, and that the United Kingdom continues to provide substantial financial support for Montserrat's health services and hospital development. That means this resolution appropriately calls upon both governments to work together. This is not, I repeat, as said before, is about assigning blame. It's totally not. It is about shared responsibility. Madam Speaker, I also believe this resolution represents an opportunity to strengthen confidence, not only among our residents, but also among visitors, investors, healthcare professionals, and the wider international community. Reliable transportation and emergency medical services are fundamental indicators of a country's readiness for development. Businesses considering investment, medical professionals considering employment, and tourists considering visiting our island all take comfort in knowing that effective emergency systems are in place. Improving emergency medical evacuation capability, therefore, strengthens not only healthcare, but also economic confidence, tourism, investment, and national development. I can't stress this enough, Madam Speaker. One aspect of this resolution deserves in particular emphasis. It calls for a public report and timetable. Good governance requires transparency. The people of Montserrat deserves to know what work remains outstanding, which agency is responsible, how much it will cost, how the work will be funded, and when it will be completed. These I am further reinforcing, Madam Speaker. These are entirely reasonable expectations. As legislators, we have a duty not only to pass laws, but to protect lives. Every family on Montserrat should have confidence that if tragedy strikes during the night, every reasonable effort has already been ensured that emergency medical evacuation can take place safely, surely and safely. We owe our constituents no less. Madam Speaker, through my service on the Public Accounts Committee, including the recent capacity building training provided by the Caribbean Association of Public Accounts Committees, CAPAC, one message has been consistently reinforced. Good governance is measured not only by the policies we adopt, but by the outcomes we deliver for our people. Oversight is about identifying risk before they become crises. It is about ensuring that public institutions remain accountable. It is about following through on commitments. It is about protecting lives through responsible planning and transparent implementation. Supporting this resolution is entirely consistent with those principles. It calls for cooperation rather than confrontation, transparency rather than uncertainty, action rather than delay. Madam Speaker, the measure of any society is not how it responds when circumstances are easy, but how well it protects its people in their moments of greatest vulnerability. We cannot choose when illness strikes. We cannot choose when accidents occur. We cannot choose whether an emergency happens during the day or in the middle of the night. What we can choose is whether we will do everything reasonably possible to ensure that our people have the safest, quickest, and most reliable access to life-saving medical care. This resolution asks us to make that choice. It asks us to place human life above politics. It asks us to work together as one legislature in the interest of every resident of Montserrat. Madam Speaker, I wholeheartedly support this resolution and respectfully encourage every honorable member of this honorable House to do the same. Madam Speaker, history will not remember the political arguments we made today. It will remember whether this honorable House did everything within its power to protect the lives of the people we are elected to serve. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you. Very much.
I recognize the Honorable Deputy Premier.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the recital for this resolution has already been presented, and I will not keep this Honorable House longer by going through this. Madam Speaker, before I move into my presentation, I will just say a few words. I agree with the Honorable Lewis that protecting lives, man, women, children, must have confidence in our medical system and access to critical care. And we're doing just that. As the evidence itself that has been presented by the honorable member speaks to what this government is doing. I also agree that delays cost lives, but I also agree that irresponsible actions and advice can also cause lives. And the very media document that is being circulated about the lives that were lost during the volcano, the coroner's report is there to speak to that. It was not because government did not put in place the necessary restrictions to save its people's lives. Operational suitability, Madam Speaker, the evidence presented to support this resolution speaks to that in the answers I've given to this House. The evidence shows, Madam Speaker, that the government, the governor of the United Kingdom are also already working together to advance this. Madam Speaker, aircraft with medical equipment, we also agree about that, Madam Speaker. We never said we were going to use an aircraft that did not have that type of equipment. I also agree that Montserrat deserves better, and that is what we are doing. We are working to ensure that they get better. Immediate, Madam Speaker, action has already been taken, ongoing, and we are preparing before disaster strikes. Madam Speaker, I also agree with the Honourable Member, Mulcair, that no society should look at the clock to determine if someone dies. But I may tell the Honourable Member that quite often it is not the medevac that may cause us to be looking at the clock, but stabilizing that patient before we move that patient, Madam Speaker, from the hospital bed to even the airport. And I am a living testimony of that experience. Madam Speaker, we are already urgently exploring and we're putting together what we need to do. The previous responses, as I said, also demonstrated that the BN2 Air Islander did not meet the requirement. Why then are we raising this point when it is addressed? This government never promised, Madam Speaker, that it was going to be using the BN2 Islander for night medevac. And every life has equal value and urgency. And that is why at the Social Services Department, no one is refused medical evacuation when the need arises. Government does not withhold medical evacuation or attention from anyone. We are not averse to accountability, and we will provide the information, Madam Speaker, when the time arrives and determined. We cannot be irresponsible and come forth just for coming forth's sake. So, Madam Speaker, I will say those few words on the comments, on the submissions that have been made before this House. And perhaps, maybe at this point, just for the record and for some persons, Madam Speaker, I trust that these documents that I refer to, that I received as an attachment, are not ones that you have prohibited. And if you have done so, please do not hesitate to correct me. In the event, as I go, Madam Speaker, as I speak, if you say it's prohibited, I will concur. March 3rd sitting, and I presume these are from our Hansards. Operations, can the Honourable Minister of Bail tell the Honourable House which of the aircrafts that frequent John Osborne Airport have the required performance margins for safe night departures, and if other aircraft available in the region or worldwide have been found to be suitable for the said purpose. And Madam Speaker, operations at John A. Osborne Airport are limited to daytime operation in virtual meteorological conditions in accordance with the Governor's instructions. Night operations are therefore not currently authorized. Any aircraft operating at John A. Osborne must demonstrate compliance with the required takeoff and landing performance criteria appropriate to aircraft type, specifically Performance Class A, Performance Class B airplanes. The aircraft that most frequently operates at John A. Osborne Airport are the BN2 Islander and the DHC-6 Twin Otter. Both aircrafts are capable of meeting that required performance criteria for daytime operations when operated within approved weight and environment limitations. However, available technical assessments indicate that the BN2 Islander, which is a performance class B2 aircraft, does not provide sufficient assured obstacle clearance margins in the event of an engine failure during departure, particularly under night conditions where obstacle avoidance by visual reference would be limited. Performance Class A aircraft such as DHC-6 Twin Otter offer improved engine climb out of performance and are generally better suited operation from short runways. However, operation would still depend on aircraft weight, environmental conditions, and regulatory approval. It is important to note that aircraft performance suitability for night departure cannot be determined by aircraft type alone. Compliance must be demonstrated through a formal safety risk assessment and performance analysis that considers aircraft performance, runway characteristics, terrain, obstacle environment, and operational procedures. Madam Speaker, I'm quoting. Madam Speaker, in addition to fixed-wing aircraft, twin-engine helicopters represent a potential alternative for night medical evacuation operations. Madam Speaker, these are records from this honorable House. And then they added, helicopters do not rely on runway takeoff performance and may offer operational advantages in environments with terrain and obstacle constraints. However, helicopter night operation would still require appropriate infrastructure, operational procedures, and regulatory approval before they would be implemented safely. Any future implementation of night operations at John A. Osborne Airport will be subject to the regulatory approval based on demonstrated safety and the satisfactory mitigation of operational risks. Madam Speaker, does this sound like a government that does not care about the lives of its people and does not want to advance medical evacuation? The evidence will speak for itself. Madam Speaker, I also refer to a document coming out of the Foreign and Commonwealth Development Office that provided written parliamentary question 86193 that asks for the Secretary of State of Foreign and Commonwealth and Development Affairs what steps is being taken to improve primary health care provision on Montserrat, its adequacy. And Madam Speaker, the Honorable Stephen Doughty said, the United Kingdom remains committed to meeting the reasonable assistance needs of Montserrat. Much of the Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office funding allocated to the government of Montserrat. Madam Speaker, and in bracket the 62 million, is used to support the provision of primary health care on island. This includes the construction of Montserrat new national hospital, as well as delivery of Montserrat health transformation strategy and necessary medical evacuations of island. This is not indicating that the British government is not willing to work with us. Madam Speaker, I return back to another document by my Honorable Dr. Buffon that spoke of Medivac challenges on the 25th of February in this Honorable House. And Dr. Honorable Member indicated the barriers to achieving timely medical evacuation have been as follows. The primary problems have been failure to have patients accepted by an appropriate tertiary facility nearby, combined with marked limitation in arranging emergency travel off island. Montserrat's present situation regarding medical evacuation is uniquely flawed by our present air travel rules. So off-island travel between 6 p.m. and 6 a.m. is not allowed, even in an emergency, as per rules by the Safety Support International, which is ASI. Most staffed and equipped medical evacuation aircraft, because of the specifications, are not allowed to travel on the island because of ASI's regulations. As a result, some of our time-critical emergencies can become trapped on the island depending on what time of day they present. Going forward, we expect some flexibility with these rules as they relate to medical evacuation in time-critical cases after hours. Unfortunately, recent failed medical evacuation have occurred during normal daytime hours because the accepting facility was too far away to allow transfer by our local airline within a few hours.
Point of order. Sorry, Madam Speaker, I just need to know what document she's reading from.
I
please.
was just looking myself. Yes, please.
Madam Speaker, this document I found as an attachment when I received the resolution, and it is dated on it's from our Hansard. Clearly, Dr. Honorable Buffon speaks of Medivac challenges, 25th of February 2025, legislative transcript generated by AI.
No,
like I said
that
to you,
one
Madam
is not
Speaker,
allowed. I'm sorry.
If it's not allowed,
I'm
then,
sorry.
All right. So this is
So
one
that one
was
should
presented.
not be.
All right,
Yeah,
Madam
because
Speaker.
that's why I was searching, because
Yes,
I
Madam
really,
Speaker.
yes.
So you see,
Thanks,
Madam
Honourable.
Speaker, when this type of evidence is presented,
Don't make any reference to it at all, please, because it was not circulated in the proper way. It did not come through the clerk's office, and I ruled earlier that those should not be referenced. I'm sorry that, you went so deep into it, but I was looking to see that it was one
Speaker?
admissible.
I would, as I agree, concur. But we all know the rules of this House. And I dare say at this point that this also constitutes an abuse of process. And one of the reasons, Madam Speaker, if I were in another place, I would have asked for this to be struck out even before we go. But Madam Speaker,
Let
I will
us
go to
speak
my
to
presentation.
the resolution. Yes, please.
I rise, Madam Speaker, to continue to contribute to the resolution standing in the name of the honourable member of the opposition concerning medical evacuation, aviation safety, and night operations at the John A. Osborne Airport. Madam Speaker, this government has been about people, partnership, progress, and prosperity. And prosperity here is not only about economic prosperity, it's about our health, social, and our spiritual lives. As we say, above all things, we wish for people to be of good health and that they prosper as their soul prospers. Government is committed and has demonstrated its commitment at working with urgency, prioritizing, Madam Speaker, this matter before Cabinet, before our discussions with our FCDO officers, and the Honourable Minister, also of Health, Madam Speaker, has been advancing her case. Let me say at the outset that this is a matter of utmost importance and, of course, urgency, and that is why we're giving it that attention. Medical evacuation is not an abstract policy issue for Montserrat, nor is it to be sensationalized. It's about the ability of our people to access urgent specialist medical care when that care cannot be provided locally. It is about families who may be facing a medical crisis and who need to know that the systems of government, health, aviation, and emergency response are working together in their interests. Madam Speaker, this issue must also be understood in the wider history of Montserrat post-volcano access and service challenges. The volcanic crisis did not only displace communities, it also disrupted purpose-built public facilities, affected the availability of specialist services and human resources, and changed the island's access arrangements. The loss of the former airport also affected the type and capability of aircraft that could serve Montserrat, as the previous airport was able to accommodate larger aircrafts than can presently operate at John A. Osborne Airport. That history helps to explain why access, health services, and medical evacuation are so closely linked for Montserrat. It does not remove the need for aviation safety compliance, but it does explain why the public quite reasonably sees medical evacuation as part of the wider question of resilience, access, and emergency response, economic development, population retention, and increase. The government recognizes the importance of safe, reliable, and properly regulated night medevac evacuation capability. It is a matter of national concern and one that we continue to advance with care, urgency, and responsibility. At the same time, Madam Speaker, it is important that the public understands the nature of what is involved. Night medical evacuation is not restored simply by making a declaration or by identifying one piece of equipment. It requires a complete pathway from clinical decision to safe departure to the receipt of the patient overseas. That pathway involves the Ministry of Health, the airport, the aircraft operators, the regulator ASI, the Governor's Office, the United Kingdom government, where support is required, emergency services, immigration, customs, security, finance, and the relevant public agencies working within a safe and lawful operating framework. Madam Speaker, because I do not want this debate to proceed on assertions alone, I intend to lay with my contribution the documents that can properly be shared. And these are the 2013 Governor's Instructions, the updated 2024 Governor's Instructions, and the Air Safety Support International Aircraft Performance Guidance. These documents help to show the evolution of the operating framework and why night medevac evacuation must be approached through safety, regulatory compliance, aircraft performance, and operational readiness. There is also an aircraft suitability work which has informed the wider discussion, and that work was commissioned to the Governor's Office and is available, Madam Speaker, from that office. For persons seeking to get that study, they should properly direct that request to the Governor's Office. Madam Speaker, it may assist the House if I set out a brief chronology of how we arrived at this present position. That chronology is not intended to disclose cabinet material, security-sensitive material, or document commissioned by other authorities. It is a public safe summary of the steps taken and the framework within the government has been working. In 2013, the governor's instructions for John A. Osborne Airport provided that flights to or from the airdrome was to be by day in visual meteorological conditions and during the notified hours of availability. The document is one of the documents I'm laying today. And Madam Speaker, this was followed on in the 2019, Madam Speaker, when the issue of night medical evacuation was brought sharply into focus following regulatory advice from Air Safety Support International, that is ASSI. The regulator reviewed then risk assessment for night medevac operation and was not satisfied that all of the relevant risks have been successfully mitigated. No, Madam Speaker, this was before this government. The concerns included aircraft performance, obstacle clearance, rejected takeoff in darkness, engine failure after liftoff, pilot night recency, and the fact that the then applicable framework did not permit visual flight rules operation at night. The airport manager subsequently advised that the night medevac flights could not be accommodated unless an acceptable risk assessment, commonly referred to as night VFR, in the overseas territories in certain circumstances. That created the opportunity to look again at what would be required locally. As a consequence, in 2024, the governor's instructions were updated. The updated instructions are also being laid today. The current instruction is not the same as the 2013 position. It allows for operation outside notified hours where specifically authorized by the person in charge of the airdrome. But that again, authorized by the person in charge of the airdrome. But that again, Madam Speaker, is subject to conditions, including visual meteorological conditions, safety risk assessments, Montserrat-specific crew training, pilot qualification, and recency requirements, and the relevant aviation authority approvals. Also, in 2024, further technical work was undertaken on aircraft performance and aircraft suitability. I am laying the Airport Safety Support International Aircraft Performance Guidance because it helps to explain why runway length, runway end safety area, payload, temperature, wind, fuel, and performance calculations matter. The separate aircraft suitability study, as I said before, was commissioned to the governor's office. More recently, further technical and operational work has brought these issues together in a staged approach for enabling night operations. In December 2025, the House was advised that the Manchester Airport Group was preparing guidance on the steps needed to progress towards regulatory authorization for night operations, and that suppliers had been contacted for their quotations for a new lighting panel, while infrastructure systems, including lighting and generating capacity, continued to be reviewed. That work was supported through the United Kingdom government assistance. This speaks, Madam Speaker, to partnership between the government, the United Kingdom, and the governor's office. In early 2026, cross-agency technical work also considered whether a limited night medical evacuation model could be progressed separately from full extended commercial night operations, and I gave that in this Honorable House, Madam Speaker, that information. That work involved airport management, the aircraft operator, policing and emergency response input, regulatory engagement through Air Safety Support International, and the relevant government ministries and agencies concerned with health, finance, security, and airport operations. The work further examined the practical possibility of a limited evening medevac window, while recognizing that even a limited model would still require the funding, the equipment, pilot certification, standby arrangements, airport readiness, health system coordination, and regulatory approval. In May 2026, further work was being taken on options for optimizing airport operating hours, including the relationship between airport readiness, operator readiness, regulator approval, staffing, and emergency response arrangement. That work is not being presented as final approval for night operations and therefore has not been brought to this House. It is part of the practical pathway required to move from the concept to safe, lawful, and sustainable implementation. The stage approach now points to the need for repair existing non-operational services, install additional equipment, address resilience and space, review procedures, review staffing, complete training, conduct a night exercise, seek regulatory approval, and maintain ongoing assessment. So, Madam Speaker, this is not a dormant issue. This is not a latent issue. This is immediate, and it's moving with urgency. It remains an active area of technical, operational, and cross-government work. It has moved from regulatory concern to its assessment, to updated instructions, to aircraft performance and suitability work, and now to a more developed implementation pathway. The remaining challenge, Madam Speaker, is to get this finished, and then the implementation. There has to be funding, procurement, staffing, training, operator readiness, health system readiness, regulatory approval, all are live. Madam Speaker, this chronology is also consistent with previous answers given in this Honorable House. As I read before in December 25, where the House was advised that nighttime medical evacuation had ceased in 2019, and that reinstatement would require the authorization, the risk assessment, upgraded lighting, which my colleagues, honorable colleagues have already referred, honorable members have already referred to, obstacle lighting, power backup reliability, rescue firefighting services readiness, air traffic control arrangement, documentation updates, and aeronautical information publication, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, does this sound like days' work in this technical area when you're dealing with safety? Madam Speaker, this is not going to sea, and even the fisherman going to sea would prepare. And I know the Minister of Agriculture, previous and now, are working to ensure that before they go to sea, that they have safety. Madam Speaker, no disrespect to the pastor. And I would curb on that one, Madam Speaker, because they said, do not touch the Lord's anointed and do his prophets no harm. The House also advised that coordination had continued with the Office of the Premier and the Governor's Office, the airport manager, and the regulator, that suppliers had been contacted for quotations for a new lighting panel. Madam Speaker, a lighting panel is not sitting on a shelf waiting for Montserrat. And sometimes we need to consider Montserrat is a small fish in a big pond. A lot of the time, Madam Speaker, they offer us grace. They offer us mercy when they hear of our conditions back here in Montserrat. And I'm talking even generally on other projects. Madam Speaker, it's important. The government's responsibility is not only to facilitate access, but to ensure that access is safe. We cannot substitute good intentions for aviation safety requirements. We cannot invite an operator, a pilot, an air traffic controller, or an emergency response team to operate in conditions for which the proper regulatory framework has not been completed. They are our people as well, and their safety is also important. Madam Speaker, it is important to place this on record. This is not a matter that government is now discovering because a resolution has been tabled. The work has been underway for some time, and the members of this House were duly informed. The matter has therefore been before this House previously. Indeed, some of the materials circulated by the honourable member include these previous answers. I will also, Madam Speaker, draw attention, Madam Speaker, for completeness, that the issue is not that the pathway has been unknown. The issue is that the pathway involves a number of interdependent steps, and each has to be completed in the correct order if Night Medivac is to be restored safely, lawfully, and sustainably. This government is not neglecting the need for Night Medivac. There is also need for the airport to demonstrate compliance to the proper process, and that includes the relevant safety risk assessment, compliance documentation, updated operation procedures, and engagement with airport, with ASI. It also includes the governor's instructions and any of the rules. And Madam Speaker, when you get a piece of new equipment, the airport has to be reassessed in line with the new equipment. Madam Speaker, there are also other practical steps to include repairing and strengthening existing aerodrome ground lighting, installing any additional lighting required for night operations, addressing the obstacle lighting, ensuring touchdown zone limit lighting are in place, assessing and strengthening backup power, assessing or replacing constant current regulators, reviewing the aerodrome manual, emergency plan, aeronautical information, and publication of the AIP entry and operating procedures, updating arrangements with the Antigua Air Traffic Services, confirming the role of health, immigration, customs, security, and emergency services, ensuring pilot and operator readiness, training airport, ATC, firefighting personnel, recruiting, conducting a night exercise, Madam Speaker, as I said before. Madam Speaker, government is continuous. And I like to give credit to whom credit is due. The new airport tower has been there sitting and is now being made ready to accommodate staff. Technical readiness also has to be undertaken. Madam Speaker, those staff were sitting in that tower for how many years? When it rains, Madam Speaker, the place floods, and no one considered it was urgent to bring those matters to this House in a resolution. But this government is ensuring that the new tower is adequate for the staff. And we're not saying that is enough. We're already working with the governor, Madam Speaker. And Bilty has a plan for expanding accommodation for the said staff that has to carry out this work. They are also our people. Madam Speaker, requirement for night Medivac operations have been high on the agenda. Replacement apron lights for the Medivac and its installation have been prepared. And so, Madam Speaker, we're not just sitting, twiddling our thumbs. Neither are these sitting on shelves. This is why, Madam Speaker, this matter cannot be reduced to an item of equipment or one decision. Each part of the chain has to be ready, and that has to be understood. So it's not whether government recognizing the importance of night Medivac and with urgency. We are already, Madam Speaker, taking the steps, the actions. The issue is now how we restore that capability in the manner that does not create a new risk while trying to solve an existing one. you would have already heard that a special team, Madam Speaker, was created to advance this work. This has again, Madam Speaker, come out of with the Governor's office working with us, with our staff, with the United Kingdom. Madam Speaker, we must not try to mislead. The minister herself, during question time, have told, just in our last, when she presented, that the ministry was working on figures to advance night medevac. The MOUs with the receiving states developed from discussions with Guadeloupe and Martinique and Trinidad, and she has explained the challenges with that length to travel and take a patient to Trinidad. The Honorable Premier has already begun discussions with Guadeloupe and Martinique, and as was already spoken of, because he announced it in here, that when he goes to his heads of meeting, he is going to be advancing that cause. Madam Speaker, this speaks to urgency and parallel activity. It is important, and I want to reiterate that this specific question of night medevac is to be distinguished from full commercial night operations and a limited emergency medevac model. The latter may be more limited in scope, but is not exempt from safety and regulatory requirements. Even in a limited night medevac arrangement would still require all the necessary lighting, power resilience, aircraft and pilot readiness, airport staffing or standby arrangements, rescue firefighting services readiness, air traffic arrangement, health system coordination, receiving arrangements overseas, funding or guarantee arrangements, and regulatory approval. The objective is not simply to open the airport at night. The objective is to ensure that where a patient requires urgent off-island care, the full chain from clinical decision to safe departure and overseas receipt can operate lawfully, Madam Speaker. And that as well, Madam Speaker, family members are confident that the system that is in place can be trusted, not to create a disaster waiting to happen, putting our patients, our pilots, our safety officers at risk. Madam Speaker, I crave your indulgence, and I wish to address the aircraft issue raised in the resolution. This government understands the public concerns about the aircraft serving Montserrat. Montserrat has a short runway, surrounding terrain, variable operating conditions, and a very particular aviation environment. Aircraft performance, therefore, cannot be treated casually. Payload, runway length, climb performance, landing performance, wet runway conditions, and temperature, patient carriage, fuel, reliability, and operating costs all matter. ASI's aircraft performance guidance also explains why this matter must be treated technically. Madam Speaker, I am no technician. Montserrat runway is short, and the introduction of the RISA in 2016 affected the declared usable runway distance. Performance calculations depend on weight, temperature, wind, runway length, payload, and fuel. A larger aircraft may have more seats on an unrestricted runway, but at Montserrat, that advantage may be reduced by performance requirements and safety margins. It is also important to note that this Honorable House understands that the aircraft question has not been treated as a matter of assumptions. Aircraft suitability work has been undertaken, as I said, to the Governor's office, and that work considered a number of aircraft types, including the Britain Normand Islander, Cessna Caravan variants, the Daha Kodiak, please forgive me, Madam Speaker, if I'm not pronouncing these correctly, Pilatus PC-12, Technam P212, Stoll, the twin auto variants. The work has informed the wider discussion, but the study itself has not been released by our ministry. What can be said safely is that aircraft suitability for Montserrat cannot be determined by just seat count alone. Madam Speaker, the findings do not support a simplistic conclusion that any larger aircraft would automatically be better for Montserrat. Some aircraft may offer more seating generally, but lose that advantage when required to operate from Montserrat's short runway under international performance standards. Some aircraft may have strong takeoff performance, but weaker landing performance in wet conditions or low headwind. Some aircraft may be suitable for specific air ambulance mission, but not for regular scheduled airline service. Some newer aircraft may offer operational advantages, but also higher ownership costs. All are being considered. In other words, Madam Speaker, aircraft suitability is not a political assertion, it's a technical assessment. I am further aware, Madam Speaker, that the members have been provided with further material arguments concerning the BNTY lander, its accident history, aircraft performance, and the urgency of restoring medical evacuation. Those materials underline the seriousness of the issue, but they do not remove the need for government to rely on the proper technical, regulatory, and operational processes. Accident reports and technical commentaries will inform the questions to be asked, but aircraft suitability for Montserrat must ultimately be assessed through the recognized aviation safety channels and the regulator engagement and operator-specific performance assessment and the actual conditions at John A. Osborne Airport. And Madam Speaker, the studies and review also show that there are legitimate questions which we will continue to explore. These include whether any regulatory flexibility is available, whether further aircraft variants should be assessed, whether the economic case should be deepened, and whether any future access strategy should be aligned with longer-term airport planning. But those questions must be dealt with through the proper technical and regulatory economic assessment. Airport viability, Madam Speaker, much discussion about that as well has been taking place in the public. It is not, Madam Speaker, that declaring from this House that one aircraft is safe or unsafe, or that one aircraft type is the complete solution. Where further aircraft or regulatory options are to be explored, they must be explored through the proper channels. Madam Speaker, on the question of our relationship, we must not, Madam Speaker, mislead the public into thinking that the aircraft issue can be solved just by preference alone, or what is the best aircraft for Montserrat that can operate safely. And I reiterate it, Madam Speaker, lawfully, reliably, and affordably within the Montserrat conditions. And we, Madam Speaker, have been working with United Kingdom, the governor, and the governor's office. And I welcome their continued support that can assist Montserrat in advancing safe and compliant night operation. But again, we must be careful, because the governor and ASI cannot simply waive aviation standards, safety standards, Madam Speaker. Yes, there's an urgency, and we work together to prioritize this with the funding, strong coordination, collaborate, but it does not remove the obligation to comply with the aviation safety framework. We can say, Madam Speaker, our Honorable Premier, Minister of Finance, have been advancing the case in the United Kingdom as well as here locally. We can also say that ASI has engaged technically with the airport and has indicated a willingness to provide further support to assist Montserrat in reaching a compliant position. The United Kingdom support through the Governor's Office is also present, and Madam Speaker, is understood in terms of regulatory engagement and the technical advice. Her Excellency and the Premier are both advancing the cause for Knight Medivac as well as our ministry. And we will continue that, Madam Speaker. And this includes the required infrastructure and confirming the funding route. We cannot simply just jump and speak, Madam Speaker, until certain things, or as you say, you have your ducks lined up. On funding, the position must be stated carefully. The technical work that has been identified, funding options have been and continue to be discussed, and the final commitment will be dealt with through the proper budgetary and procurement, because we seem to forget that we have procurement rules as well, and the cabinet processes. The government approach is to ensure that the scope is properly defined, the costs are properly tested, and any funding route is lawful, affordable, and sustainable. Madam Speaker, again, the involvement of Manchester Airports Group speak to and evidences the support of the United Kingdom. It is not, however, to be treated as a substitute for regulatory approval or government decision-making. It has been used to help inform the practical sequencing of the work required: infrastructure readiness, the operational procedures, staffing, training, resilience, equipment, and the steps needed before any application can be properly advanced. And so, Madam Speaker, when things are put in place, then you can come to this Honorable House or to the public and put forward your plan that has been properly thought through, analyzed, not wishy-washy. Madam Speaker, I wish to say that Knight Medivac is not only an airport issue. The airport is a critical part of the solution, but the Medivac chain with the other partners is also important. As we look, Madam Speaker, you will see that there's cross-government discussions that are taking place with our Premier and the Ministry of Health, and I will leave that, Madam Speaker, for the Minister of Health to address. She has already shared her concerns, and she does not only share them here, but in whatever meeting we are having, it is on the agenda, front burner. And so it is important that we allow that the relevant facilities that are clinically appropriate and available and affordable. This government approaches its cross-government relationships with respect. My ministry has responsibility for the airport infrastructure and enabling aviation infrastructure in particular. Health is leading on the medical and patient care elements. The Ministry of Finance engaged on the funding. The Governor's Office and ASSI have critical roles as well with funding, safety, and regulatory oversight. And the operators, airport team must be satisfied that the operations can ultimately be conducted safely. The work has also been discussed through cross-agency aviation safety and operational channels, because Knight Medivac cannot be delivered by the airport alone. It requires, Madam Speaker, other airport management and traffic arrangements and ECA. Madam Speaker, I'm also mindful that some of the work of this matter is very technical. Those documents cannot all be rehearsed here today in detail, but I can say that the pathway is being designed. The board requirements have been identified and will continue the coordinating work with, as explained. To be clear, I'm not placing cabinet materials or security-sensitive operation material on the floor of this House, I must be responsible. But there is enough that can properly be said publicly. The requirements have been identified, the technical work has been advanced, and the regulators engaged. Aircraft suitability has been examined, and a staging roadmap is being developed to move this forward. Just to mention, in relation to procurement, I want to be clear that government must proceed properly. Where equipment is required, or whether for lighting or whatever, Madam Speaker, this must fall and be compliant with the procurement route. Urgency does not mean abandoning the rules. It means moving the process with discipline and focus within the rules. This resolution calls for urgency, and government accepts that the matter is being dealt with urgency. But urgency in aviation cannot mean bypassing safety procurement, funding, and regulatory requirements. Urgency must mean disciplined follow-through on the work already identified, Madam Speaker, repairing and the existing infrastructure and doing it correctly, Madam Speaker, and all the other requirements. The objective must be to reduce risks, not to create a new one. Madam Speaker, we will continue our engagement with the United Kingdom, the Governor's Office on funding and technical support required, the funding options we continue, Madam Speaker, to explore. I do not believe this matter, as I said, should be reduced to a contest over who cares more about patients. All members of this House understand the importance of medical evacuation. All of us understand that when a family is in crisis, we are in crisis. The delay can be frightening and painful. In a small community like Montserrat, these matters are deep, they're deeply personal, and they're felt by all of us. Our responsibility as a government is to turn that concern into a safe, lawful, and sustainable service. Madam Speaker, I therefore welcome the opportunity to place on record that the Governor recognizes, and Madam Speaker, not only recognizes, but it is this government that is advancing the medical evacuation capability. It recognizes that the issue is complex. We recognize that the public expects continued progress and deserve to have it. We recognize that the work must be advanced in a way that is technically sound, properly funded, and operationally realistic and compliant with the required aviation safety framework. Our government is actively seeking and will continue to advance this. These issues have been placed, as I said, before this House, not today, but before. Yes, a resolution can highlight the importance of the issue, but implementation requires a lot more. The way forward is not to defend the status quo for its own sake, nor to chase an operational option simply because it appears attractive. A couple of days. The way forward is to do the right thing, complete the technical, regulatory, financial, and operational work needed to restore night medevac and strengthen Montserrat's air access in a way that is safe, practical, and sustainable. The government is advancing this, Madam Speaker, safe, reliable, properly regulated night medical evacuation from Montserrat. We can also say with respect to affordable, and the Honourable Minister will speak to that, because affordability in healthcare is part of the health transformation plan. This government continues to support and we provide monies, Madam Speaker, when health falls short. And where we do not have it, we continue to look for that money because the health of our people is important. It is the first pillar. It's the first pillar of our vision that we have a healthy Montserrat. We do so with urgency, but we also do so with responsibility. We will not compromise safety. We will not make unsupported technical claims. We will not pretend that complex regulatory and operational matters can be solved overnight in a couple of days. The work will continue with urgency and with responsibility. The people of Montserrat deserve access to urgent medical care. They also deserve an aviation system and an airport that is safe, compliant, and sustainable. That is the balance that a responsible government must maintain, and that is the basis on which this matter must be advanced. Madam Speaker, for these reasons, and I'm going to be very clear so that there is no mistake when the time comes as to where I am going. The government supports safe, reliable, properly regulated night medical evacuation. And we submit, we're doing it with urgency, and I cannot support the resolution as framed. The issue is too important to be reduced to a declaration that does not itself resolve the technical, regulatory, operational funding, health systems that the government continues to advance. Madam Speaker, given the evidence before us, the evidence presented by the mover of the resolution, and I say it with respect, this resolution is unsustainable as framed. The very evidence laid before this House demonstrates that the government has been addressing the issue of medical evacuation and safety with urgency. We need to restore safe, affordable, reliable night medevac. Respect to what has been told. Hearsay is hearsay. Aircraft operation, people may say what they want, but Madam Speaker, whosoever will may come. But who is chosen is another matter. By the very admission, the honourable member acknowledges that there is progress and the work that has been done. 6 years ago, this government was not in office. And if we go further, Madam Speaker, and normally I do not advance that because government is continuous. But let us acknowledge the work that has been taken. Today, Madam Speaker, we speak of barking dogs, but I've known some barking dogs that bark at wind. They bark at some butterfly flying past. They bark at a little iguana. So, Madam Speaker, some barking dogs make noise. Madam Speaker, the watchman must not only be looking out when he goes on the ramparts, but must have an understanding of what is involved in protecting the people. And God says through his word, you get knowledge, you get wisdom, but in all thy wisdom, in all thy getting, get understanding. Madam Speaker, I can say with confidence that no other government has moved this matter with urgency as this sitting government. Madam Speaker, I know we diminish the contribution of the past administrations. I can speak, Madam Speaker, for the MCAP government, of which I was then a part, that when we arrived in government, the tower cab was sitting on the ground exposed to the elements. And we took a decision that the tower must be built. As I said earlier, the staff was subject to danger. And this government, with the Ministry of Build and staff support from the UK, is moving, as I said, to complete that building. Partnership continues. We may have disagreement, and that's what healthy discussions are all about. But we can demonstrate that we are committed to Knight Medivac. I am not going to rehash all that has been taking place. Select committee, procurement of requisite equipment, clearing land, the Ministry of Health exploring the MOUs, and the receiving partners. Madam Speaker, ministerial statements, Premier advancing discussions with Guadeloupe. Madam Speaker, in another place, we would have said this resolution is a moot point. And if I were in court, I would perhaps advance to the bench that it be dismissed with cost. The concerns raised have been addressed, and the evidence is there. Health transformation program is moving. Madam Speaker, people do not get sick overnight. Primary care is being promoted. You have Minister Doughty's submission. I have to say, Madam Speaker, that the evidence to support this resolution is not there for me today. You cannot bring a resolution to Parliament with emotions and stories and anecdotes that is deficient, where your own evidence is contradicting your submission, and I already submitted, it's an abusive process. Madam Speaker, if I was in another place, I would have also advanced, and I do not want to use that word because this is not a frivolous matter. It is not a frivolous matter, and so I do not want to risk misunderstanding. But perhaps, Madam Speaker, I may be allowed to say close to the word vexatious. Madam Speaker, I wish this resolution was one for advancing a case for a new airport. That is what I want. The John A. Osborne Airport was a temporary fixture. We all know that. And given all the limitations and hindrances, we should also be holding a discourse. And the Youth Parliament, Madam Speaker, will take that up as well, because the Ministry of Build will be engaging them on a new airport. We have had all sorts of discussions on what could happen, shorten, expand. The cost, Madam Speaker, is exorbitant. And Madam Speaker, my team at Build would tell you, Mrs. Hector likes 2 for 1, and she likes value, and we do not like to work twice. So, Madam Speaker, we'll continue to fight to offer affordable and reliable access by sea and land for our people, for the development of our country, because this is lifeline. We will continue, Madam Speaker, to advance again with urgency, and both are all interlinked. Safe, affordable night medevac with urgency. I will stand for this Parliament always. And so, Madam Speaker, I want to advance resources to support both the opposition, this legislative assembly, to perhaps support us when we are doing resolutions. And I say that respectfully. As a government, I confirm we remain committed to advancing our work and providing where we already have day and night medevac services with urgency. And we await the Premier's return. We also would await, Madam Speaker, the honourable member, if she chooses to speak, which I know she's most likely to, but I will not preempt her, on what has been happening to progress this much needed service to our people. Madam Speaker, thank you very much for allowing me the time to place my position on record. And it is in no way that I take this matter lightly. But, Madam Speaker, I will rest my case. I also wanted to say, which I forgot, that there's much reference to the Access Committee. That Access Committee suffered because of conflict of interest, and what could have been a strong piece of document coming out of there is still available in your office, but under the regulation of standing orders, not for us to pick up our notes and use them loosely. There is also a process. So, Madam Speaker, I know this House will continue to be a very serious House, and that we remain committed to advancing that which is good for our people. Once again, I thank you, and I rest at this time.
I recognize the Honorable Minister of Agriculture, Housing, Lands.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I rise to speak on the motion brought today by the Honourable Romeo, which really focuses on medical evacuations and the Islander aircraft. To set the tone, Madam Speaker, and so that there is no confusion in this House or among the public listening today, let me begin by saying very clearly, this government does not dispute that getting a sick patient off this island quickly, by day or by night, can be the difference between life and death. We do not dispute that night medevac matters. We do not dispute that our people deserve a service that is safe and reliable. Madam Speaker, on those things, the honourable member and myself agree, and I will not pretend otherwise. But, Madam Speaker, agreeing on the problem is not the same as agreeing with this motion as it is drafted. And I say as it is drafted, Madam Speaker, because this motion asks me to do something I cannot do in good conscience, and that is to stand here and say the government must be told to act, especially after questions were asked and answered in this very House, giving the proof that the government has been acting from our inception, Madam Speaker. And Madam Speaker, here is the remarkable thing. The honourable member bringing this resolution has confirmed that he asked these very same questions in this House and was answered. The honourable member even provided the proof in the documents he attached and read them in his presentation. So let us be plain about what is happening. The honourable member in his motion is now asking this House to vote to tell the government to do the very same things that his own speech and attachments show we are already doing with urgency. As Madam Speaker, this was one of the very first things we started to address in our very first full fiscal year. That is urgency, Madam Speaker. And Madam Speaker, I'm sorry to say, but one really cannot make these things up. But let me show the House and the public exactly what I mean today, Madam Speaker. His resolution complains that night medevac stopped and asks why. Madam Speaker, the honourable member has already asked that in this very House. He asked, and I quote, on what date were nighttime medevac services discontinued? And he asks for the specific reasons provided for the suspension of nighttime medevac operations. And as my colleague said, on 9th of December 2025, he was answered in this very House and in writing. Nighttime medevac stopped in November 2019. Madam Speaker, I often try to learn from my elders when they make sense. And I will take a lesson from the Honourable Romeo, as he often relies on history when making his case in this House. So I will follow his lead on this. I mentioned the November 2019 date, Madam Speaker, so that we could be clear about whose watch that fell on. Madam Speaker, the honourable member was Premier of this island for 5 years, from September 2014 until that very month, November 2019. What that tells us, Madam Speaker, is that there were unresolved issues at some time during his own tenure as Premier. Issues that were not fixed at the time, Madam Speaker. But let me be even more plain. Night medevac did not stop because this government chose to stop it. It stopped because ASSI, the United Kingdom air safety regulator, advised prior to that date in November that the islander did not have the safety margins for a night takeoff without an approved safety case. That is a regulator's decision, Madam Speaker. And Madam Speaker, a regulator does not arrive at such a decision overnight. And this decision could not have just appeared randomly in November 2019. Madam Speaker, Montserrat has never run commercial passenger flights here after dark at the current airport. Night operations of any kind require a safety case acceptable to the regulator to include the assessment of aircraft performance, obstacle clearance, lighting, and emergency procedures. And Madam Speaker, that safety case was never put in place, at least not across the 5 years the honourable member was Premier. So are we now really surprised that it stopped? Madam Speaker, what I am saying is when the matter came to a head in 2019, there was nothing for future governments to fall back on, causing subsequent governments to start almost from scratch on this issue. But now he asks for immediate action. And Madam Speaker, since he is now saying that 10 days is too long to wait, then I must say now that this reflects groundwork left undone through the very years he led this government. A matter he should have fought to fix on his own watch within days, Madam Speaker, as he passionately says. Madam Speaker, but instead he left them unresolved. If those were fixed then, Madam Speaker, when this issue first arose, we would not be in this situation today. And Madam Speaker, there is one more thing this House should remember. When the honourable member was Premier, he took the Access Division, the very department responsible for how our people get on and off this island, out of the portfolio of the Honourable Paul Lewis and placed it directly under himself in the office of the Premier. So let me ask him, Madam Speaker, through you, were the very medevac and night flying concerns now before this House one of the reasons he brought Access under his own hand? Because if there were, Madam Speaker, then this was not the same distant problem he could not reach. It was a problem he chose to take directly into his own office and still left unresolved, although to him, they only take days to fix. But Madam Speaker, I must say that I am honored that he thinks that this government can fix issues in days that he could not resolve in years. And Madam Speaker, I want the public to understand simply what I am saying here. As this is an issue of healthcare, Madam Speaker, we all can agree that prevention is better than cure, and that as the Premier and Minister with responsibility for access, he should have prevented Medivac from being stopped in the first place. That the solutions he proposed today as easy solutions, Madam Speaker, he should have employed them back then. Well, it had to come before the election. Moving on, Madam Speaker. His resolution calls on the government to put in place the equipment, the approvals, and the arrangements to bring night Medivac back. He asks about this in this very house too. He asks, and I quote, Madam Speaker, what infrastructural, operational, and financial requirements must be met to reinstate nighttime Medivac capability together with the estimated costs? And Madam Speaker, my colleague gave him the answer, which included the requirements that government had already worked out together with the regulator. Madam Speaker, let me just put them on record again. They include the runway and approach lighting, the replacement of lighting control units the regulator had flagged as critical, the new control tower lighting panel, the obstacle lighting, the backup power, the night train fire and rescue cover, the air traffic rosters for nighttime callouts, and the manuals that must be updated. Madam Speaker, we do not need to be told to find out what was required, as the resolution suggests. We had already found out, and those requirements were provided to this House, Madam Speaker, at his very own request. Madam Speaker, his resolution also calls for a report setting out what is being done and who is responsible. He asked about this too. He asked, and I quote, what has she, the Minister, the Honourable Dorset Hector, or the government done since the last sitting to secure such reinstatement? And he was answered, Madam Speaker, let me put that on record again, in case he missed that one too. The Honourable Minister of Build set out in her reply to him that a working group was set up with the regulator, that the regulator's full list of requirements were obtained, that the replacement apron floodlights were already on island and being prepared for installation, that the Manchester Airport Group was brought in to guide us to regulatory approval, that quotations were sought for the new lighting panel, and the lighting and generator capacity were under review. The only thing still left open were the final cost and the firm dates, Madam Speaker. The same reply tells us we are waiting on the regulator to confirm specifications, Madam Speaker, not waiting on this government. There's also more the resolution leaves out. Paragraph B asks for someone to study which aircraft suit our airport and to report on it. Madam Speaker, that study has already been done and reviewed by the regulator and published for anyone to read. It examined the Islander, the Twin Otter, the Caravan, the Kodiak, the Pilatus, and the Tecnam. And it was answered again on this very floor in answer to the Honourable Member himself. On the 3rd of March, Madam Speaker, he asked this House which aircraft have the margins for safe night departure and whether a more suitable aircraft exists. He was given a full answer that both the Islander and the Twin Otter meet the criteria for our daytime operations, that the Islander, as a performance B-class aircraft, does not give sufficient obstacle clearance margin in the event of an engine failure on a night departure, that the Twin Otter, a performance Class A aircraft, offers better climb out for our short runway, and that night operations, whatever the aircraft, require a formal safety case and regulatory approval before they can begin. He asked, and he was answered, Madam Speaker. And now in paragraph B, he asks his House to call for the very assessment he admits today that he had already received. And Madam Speaker, I hope the Honourable Member isn't trying to imply that this government has forced the Islander on Montserrat. Maybe he also forgot that we brought back the Twin Otter service, and not only on the Antigua route, but also on the St. Martin route, opening up another hub for Montserrat that has long been short of connections. Not only that, Madam Speaker, but I'm glad the honourable member has admitted that he knows we have started conversations with these other countries about medical services. These will further increase our healthcare options, Madam Speaker. Now, Madam Speaker, this brings me to something the public needs to understand, because the resolution gets this very wrong. Several of its clauses speak as though government chooses which aircraft the airlines fly, and that government could simply order them to choose a better one. Madam Speaker, that is not how commercial aviation works. I'll break it down. The airline itself chooses the aircraft it can afford to run. The regulator, in this case ASI, then decides whether it is safe to fly. And the traveling public, Madam Speaker, chooses which airline to fly with. The government does not and cannot ban an aircraft or order a private airline to buy a specific plane. And Madam Speaker, I am more than sure the honourable member knows this. His own resolution at paragraph B calls upon the safety regulator itself, ASI. So, Madam Speaker, with one hand, he points to the regulator who controls these matters, and with the other, he blames the government for them. And then in his speech today, Madam Speaker, admits he knows we are working on the solution. Madam Speaker, when you read the recitals of this resolution closely, most of them do not actually support what I think he wants to ask for. Some are simply statements everyone agrees with, that health matters, that we are isolated, that safety is important. Others reach back more than 20 years to re-argue decisions made before the airport was even built. None of that tells this House anything about what is being done today, and the very member moving this resolution has admitted today that he was already been given the answers in this House that set out in detail what this government has done. So, Madam Speaker, let me just close plainly in support of my Honourable Deputy Premier and the Minister of Build. This government shares the concern at the heart of this resolution. We're doing the work to bring back Night Medivac, including the regulatory work and the equipment work. The aircraft question has been studied and published, and I must say, we are not wedded to the islander, and we show this because we are the ones who engage the Twin Otter services. But, Madam Speaker, in this House, I hold myself to the same simple standard of truth that the Honourable Romeo said today he holds himself to. And, Madam Speaker, I ask this House to hold itself to the same, and I quote the honourable member, that we deal in truth. And on the truth, Madam Speaker, this resolution cannot stand. It misunderstands who decides which aircraft may fly, and it is contradicted by the very answers the honourable member was given in this very House. To vote for it would put this Assembly's name to a false impression, when indeed the honourable member knows better, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, he now says his real concern is that things are moving too slowly, that what was set out in December has not come far enough by June. He should have brought that in his resolution instead. When you ask for immediate, that's what you're saying. And so...
Not across the floor, please.
And so he doesn't misunderstand me, Madam Speaker. Let me just be very clear. Let him bring a motion that asks the honest questions. Is the progress on this issue good enough? And not what must be done, but what more must be done, Madam Speaker. That is a debate I think my colleagues and I would welcome, and one I think that this government would support. But that is not the resolution I am now asked to vote on, Madam Speaker, and I think it must be clear to the public we're not voting on the speeches, we're voting on what was presented in the resolution itself. And Madam Speaker, I must be clear also, this is also not the first time. Not long ago, this House was asked to support another resolution carried by the very same flaw. It recited concerns, but perhaps purposefully left out the work the government had already advanced prior to the resolution. And for that reason, Madam Speaker, we could not support it. Madam Speaker, we do not want this to become a recurring pattern in this House, where resolutions are brought in a form that leaves the government no choice but to vote against them. That serves no one, Madam Speaker. Not this House, not the public listening, and not the very causes these resolutions claim to advance. For these reasons, Madam Speaker, I will say up front, I cannot support this resolution today as drafted. Because, Madam Speaker, as I said again, we are voting on what is drafted and not the speeches, some of which contradict the very resolution in its current form. However, Madam Speaker, as the great negotiator, as he called me today, let me offer or try to negotiate a better way. Perhaps I can negotiate with him to amend his motion to reflect the facts. I would then invite the honourable member to follow the example of the honourable leader of the opposition, the very member from whom, as Premier, he took the Access Division, and the very member his own party later chose to lead them in his place, and sit with the government from time to time on specific issues, just like the honourable leader. I would even then invite him to identify or highlight the issues or constraints he faced on these very topics in his former capacity as Premier, so that what comes before and from this House, Madam Speaker, is a resolution that is complete and grounded in not just facts, but historical evidence. And I would ask that going forward, all resolutions be brought in the same spirit, setting out not only the concern, Madam Speaker, but the actual position, so that this House can weigh the full picture, and so the government is not put in the exact same position time and time again. And I thank you, Madam Speaker.
I recognize the Honorable Minister of Education and Health.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I would like to thank the opposition member, Honourable Romeo, for bringing fast and efficient Medivac to the table, for highlighting some of the issues. And I'd like to thank the other members of the opposition for their support for good health care as it relates to Medivac. So today, Madam Speaker, is not a day on which I need to campaign for health care, because every member of this House has agreed that fast and efficient Medivac is essential to good health care and to the lives, the safety, and the well-being of all persons on Montserrat. I agree with most of what the honourable member has to say. It's important that we sort out Medivac in its entirety, including Medivac at night. I disagree with the FCDO's position that ASI should be making our rules on flying. I believe that we should be following a regional body in terms of flying. And if it is that our colonial status or our dependency means that we are stuck with this arrangement, then my real question in that regard is, if the FCDO cares so much about flying and are insisting on having a UK body govern us, what about all the other things in healthcare? Why is it that we are not following UK standards of care in terms of everything else that we do? I believe that the clinicians at Glendon today, if they're listening in between their hard work, in particular those who deal with stabilizing critically ill patients and getting patients out, I believe that today they are very glad that medical evacuation, that night flying, has been brought to the table, because it has been years of having this challenge, and the clinicians who work in health have wanted so much for such a very long time. So even though a lot of what has been said today by the opposition are important and vital and real and truthful, I must also acknowledge what our Deputy Premier has just said, which is that so much is being done by this government already. I must also acknowledge what Honourable Osborne has said, describing some of our attempts to make things right, and highlighting the obvious, the missed opportunities that Honorable Romeo has let slip in terms of supporting Medivac flying healthcare. I sound emotional, Madam Speaker, because I am. I would like to acknowledge the work of the health team who have, over the past year and more, been working on a memorandum of understanding with Guadeloupe. This MOU requires only a signature and $300,000 EC. This MOU allows Guadeloupe to prioritize Montserrat, the patients from Montserrat, for care in Guadeloupe. So our time-critical emergencies can get to a first world facility only 35 to 40 miles away, which means with the right aircraft, we can get them there in 20 to 25 minutes. As to which aircraft we use, that is not my specialty. And I know that our government is paying due diligence to the need for the correct aircraft. In Guadeloupe, our patients can have coronary artery stenting, bypass grafting. Guadeloupe is a major trauma center, the top of its class in major trauma centers. They also have neurosurgeons who can deal with intracranial bleeds and anything else that we have on this island. They have 19 specialties and a new hospital that can deal with it all. The MOU with Guadeloupe also gives us access to their military helicopter that can come and get our patients at 2 o'clock in the morning in our present situation in the middle of a thunderstorm, Madam Speaker. So I await patiently and comfortably the decision of our government to support this MOU. I would like to thank and to acknowledge the role that Fly Montserrat has had in my entire career as a clinician at Glendon. I would like to thank Nigel Harris in particular, who has accepted any number of calls from me as a doctor about Medivac, in particular those moments when we're desperately trying to get a patient off island. And Nigel goes, "Yes, Ingrid, we can do this." He has been willing to help. And I must acknowledge the many successes in Medivac that have happened through Fly Montserrat, including a dear patient and family friend of mine who several years ago had a heart attack and presented to Glendon. And we managed to get her across to Guadeloupe quickly on a Fly Montserrat plane. We put in the cardiac monitor and all the adjuncts and staff. I went myself, and she's alive and well today. So they have been successes through Fly Montserrat. But Madam Speaker, why I feel emotional today is because it has been a really long journey for me in politics, pushing for the same thing over and over again. In 2014, I worked as a doctor at Glendon, and after seeing the same patients being inconvenienced, being stuck here, being deprived of good health care, I decided that I would make the sacrifice and run in the elections that year. So in the summer of 2014, 3 months after giving birth to my last child, who is 12 years old today, I resigned from my job as the casualty doctor at Glendon, and I joined Honorable Romeo's political party. I campaigned on the need for CT scanning, on the need for fast and efficient medical evacuation. I campaigned for 24-hour doctor cover, and I took my newborn and my other children with me out on the campaign trail over many weeks. Once we got in, the PDM, led by Honorable Romeo, who has brought this today, no longer cared about health care. Over the 10-month period that I worked with the PDM trying to represent on health, I was not invited to not even one meeting on health care. After the PDM, led by Honorable Romeo, canceled...
Let us discuss.
This
the
is very
resolution.
relevant, Madam Speaker.
Okay.
They canceled the new hospital project then, which is why I commented during his speech today when he said, we do not even have a good hospital. That was a missed opportunity then. Madam Speaker, I crossed the floor in 2014 and sat as an independent member in opposition and spent the next 4 years pressing the then government led by Honorable Romeo for the same things, most of which were not supported by the team. The PDM supporters then told me, don't politicize health care. So today, it is ironic, but also pretty incredible that we all sit here acknowledging that it is essential to politicize healthcare because the decisions that government make directly affect health outcomes, directly affect healthcare workers' ability to save lives. Even in 2018, Madam Speaker, when I obtained a master's in critical care when I returned to Montserrat, Honorable Romeo's team refused to hire me as a clinician. So it is no surprise that in 2019, the FCDO probably felt that healthcare, improvements in healthcare were not necessarily relevant to the government of the day, and night flying was not pressed for. I would like to thank the work of the government which came after, and the role of the previous governor, Sarah Tucker, and the health transformation team led by a manager who is still the manager of health transformation today, in their hard work with the critical equipment list that finally brought us CT scanning, brought us electronic medical records, brought us cardiac monitors, brought us crash carts, ECG machines, training in life support, so many of the things that I had spent several years campaigning on. Madam Speaker, I would like to acknowledge the work of Honorable Dorset Hector as a politician, now in her second term as a politician, as a woman in politics. I would like to acknowledge the brave move that Honorable Montserrat has taken to represent her country in politics, because it is not easy being a woman in politics. On Tuesday, we all sat and watched the Youth Parliament being sworn in. I sat at the back with my children, and it was wonderful and moving to see these young people, many of them women, making a decision that they were going to support their country through highlighting many of the issues that we're having on Montserrat today. I'm hoping that many of them, as they do this, will excel in their parallel careers, because it's really important that you have a couple of different careers in mind as a young person. So today, Madam Speaker, although on principle, I agree with any number of the things that Honorable Romeo has quite truthfully brought to this House, although I agree that speed of medevac is essential, location is essential, type of plane is essential, and absolutely, half the time on this island, we cannot medevac due to the absence of night flying. I would like to honor the opposition members in their commitment for health care with very wonderful speeches this morning. I would like to ask the FCDO to reconsider our relationship with ASI, or to perhaps somehow come to terms with the fact that following everything that ASI recommends has led us to this point of no night flying. But today, Madam Speaker, I must honor our Honorable Premier, Ruben T. Meade, who in October of 2024 believed in me enough to take the chance on me to make me the health minister of his party. Thank you very much, Honorable Meade. I gave him a lot of trouble. We all know this. But we also know that by the time our term is done, that he would have done his very best to support the vast majority of things that the minister who he has assigned to health has suggested, has requested, has begged for. And so today, Madam Speaker, I will not be voting with Honorable Romeo. I will be voting for my team, not just out of respect for them, but also out of respect for the hard work that is already being done, for the urgency with which all the team members of this government have been pushing for Medivac and for night flying. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
I recognize the Honorable Parliamentary Secretary Hickson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, there is a saying that says, better late than never. But I will say in this situation, Madam Speaker, that it's better never late. One of my personal goals is always to avoid playing with people's lives and livelihood. Madam Speaker, while I fully support the goal of ensuring safe, affordable, reliable, and continuous medical evacuation services for the people of Montserrat, Madam Speaker, I cannot support this resolution in its current form. If this resolution implies grounding or even restricting the use of a specific aircraft type, Madam Speaker, I don't think it is the intention of the member. But, Madam Speaker, that could unintentionally reduce air service and worsen access to emergency medical transport unless capacity is already available. We know that we have the Twin Otter, Madam Speaker, but we know the circumstances that can happen: no wind, and it cannot fly. In my opinion, Madam Speaker, this resolution does not adequately consider alternative ways to improve medical evacuation services. Yes, the resolution calls on the government of Montserrat and the United Kingdom to take immediate and urgent action to address safety concerns associated with the Britten-Norman BN-2 Islander aircraft and to ensure safe, affordable, reliable, and continuous day and night medical evacuation services for the people of Montserrat. Madam Speaker, with these, we have to identify how those actions, and it's very important, will be funded, implemented, or considered. Madam Speaker, this resolution calls for the immediate and urgent, which is strong words. It assigns the responsibility of the government of Montserrat and the United Kingdom without clearly distinguishing the responsibility of our regulators, operators, airport authorities, and service providers. Madam Speaker, we know that night flight was stopped in November 2019. And I think, we are in action 26, the year 2026. I think a better approach, Madam Speaker, back then, even now, is to call for an independent safety review, operational risk assessment, and evidence-based safety review. Madam Speaker, we know that this government has been doing a lot, and all the members here have been contributing to the fact that we have been doing a lot. There was a lapse, as I said, that they stopped night flying in November 2019, and we are in 2026. Madam Speaker, I think the recommendations that should have been made, because these recommendations basically, Madam Speaker, are mandating specific actions. And we know that funding is a big part of what happens, whether we like it or not. I mean, yes, as I say, I'm not the one who likes or enjoy or even playing with people's lives or livelihood. And that's my contribution, Madam Speaker. Thank you.
I will now, everyone has made their contributions. So I will now ask the Honorable Romeo to wrap up. But before he does so, I would like to revisit a statement that was made earlier pertaining to the Premier leaving the matter to be handled by the Deputy. I think it is an unfair statement. It is imputing improper motive against the Premier, and I would ask you, Honourable Member, to withdraw the statement as it should not form part of the record. It breaches Standing Order 34.5b, imputing improper motive. And if I would like you to withdraw it so that it can be struck from the record, please.
Madam Speaker, what did you say that I said?
That the Premier left the matter for the Deputy to handle.
Does that imply, what does that imply, that he left it?
That he is not here. If he was here on Monday, he would have been a part of the debate. But he is not here. And you said he left it for the Deputy to handle. Now, it can be assumed that he is neglecting his responsibility when you say he left it. And that is my concern. Anybody who is not here or who wasn't here Tuesday to know what went down could get the wrong impression. I have been sitting here and I have been concerned about it. So just withdraw it, please, so that it does not form part of the record.
Madam Speaker, you want me to withdraw that I said he left her to...
He left it for her to handle.
Or you want me to withdraw what you think I implied? That's two different things. I never...
Okay.
Madam Speaker, this is confusing.
So it wasn't your intention, to say that he left his responsibility.
Madam Speaker, remember the point I made in the end is that what is really serious is that this matter needs to be addressed now. That's the point I was making. So, Madam Speaker, if it displeases you or anyone misunderstands it, I'll withdraw whatever. I don't know what to withdraw. But if
the fact that the statement that he left it for the Deputy to handle, that is the part.
Lord have mercy. How do you withdraw a statement that is a fact?
So it's a fact that he left it for the deputy to
Right.
handle. You,
So-
you hear what you're
Madam
saying? He
Speaker,
can give the wrong
if it pleases you,
impression.
if it pleases this House, I withdraw the statement that the Honourable Premier left the matter for Honourable Hector to address. To have peace, and let's continue. Let's not debate that. Let me try and continue in peace.
So I recognize the Honorable Romeo to wrap up this debate, please.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Lord, help me to keep my mind on track in this House. Madam Speaker, I do not rise to defend Donaldson Romeo. Donaldson Romeo has taken blows beyond blows. I rise in support of the Honorable Dr. Buffon for the work she's been doing, her dedication over the years, and in support of her genuine wish that more urgent action be taken, Madam Speaker, because throughout the speeches I've heard, I think anybody listening out there who really understood what I said would be confused, because neither Honorable Hector nor Honorable Osborne addressed what I said. I mean, this is not a secondary school debate where you simply oppose for opposing's sake. Neither of them addressed the key word: more urgent action. Action to address Medivac in the interim. At no point have I said that. No, I tried to be generous. I tried to be, as Honorable would say, as neutral as possible by saying that the government is working. Because I know civil servants are working. I know technical people are working hard to make this happen. So how could I come here and even suggest they're not working? This resolution is not questioning that work is being done. What it is questioning is whether more urgent work needs to be done to get Medivac in place, because, Honorable Dr. Buffon, tomorrow night, next week, 2 weeks from now, a life could be lost. People could be harmed, Honorable Dr. Buffon. Honorable Buffon, I circulated those documents, which you didn't allow me to quote, for one very reason: to avoid Honorable Hector from making the mistake she has made today. Because, Madam Speaker, I am now forced to deal with issues, to clear up issues that have misled the public. And may God give me the grace and the wisdom to deal with them, because it's not good to leave this House and not clear up some things. So I repeat, I stand in full support of you, Honorable Dr. Buffon. I stand in full support of the government in getting Medivac going and doing your best to have a permanent solution in place. Madam Speaker, whether I stop Medivac or John stop Medivac or the Premier before stop Medivac does not matter today. What matters is that when we leave here, we send a message that the people of Montserrat value what people in the UK value, what people in the Isles of Scilly value. There is no way Medivac could be stopped in the UK, in the Isles of Scilly, in the BVI, in Gibraltar, or any of these countries for 6 years. It couldn't be stopped for 3 months. It couldn't be stopped for 2 weeks. It couldn't be stopped for a week. Dr. Buffon, you've made that statement in this House. That's what we're talking about tonight. Forget Don Romeo. But Don Romeo has a wife. Don Romeo has a brother and a sister and friends who could be a victim. But for God's grace, the people of Montserrat on this island, I'm calling on the government to stand up. Stand up and challenge and let the people know that we are equals, we're not dogs. The Animal Protection Society would not allow their dogs to be without medical care at night. Tell me if I'm wrong. They would never come to this House to defend the failure to put medical care in place within days. Never. Madam Speaker, let me tell you something. Depending on how we vote today, leads to this next stage. of debate, the next resolution, the next action that I hope I'm not forced to take. Because we're dealing with a conspiracy that nobody on the other side of the House is prepared to face. Yes, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, Honorable Hector was the chair of the committee I served on. I quoted what the pilot and owner of SPG said, that his pilots are literally afraid. What's your problem? You don't
I
hear
recognize the Honorable Deputy Premier.
God have mercy.
Your mic, Honorable Romeo, please. Your mic. Your mic.
Madam Speaker, I rise to cook and I want to correct it. You can quote what they say, but you go back, Madam Speaker, to the House for the documentation. And those documentation are within the possession and protection. Was an application made to have those brought to the House? Not because we were participants gives us the right to simply talk about what we wrote or did with or said. And the committee is clear, the rules governing that, Madam Speaker, is clear. When that committee had to be disbanded.
What is your point of order, Madam?
My point of order is that you are not permitted to refer to it because you did not make the necessary application before the Honourable House for that to be taken from the record and brought to this House today.
Honorable Romeo, I've heard your point, Honorable Deputy Premier. Honorable Romeo, let's continue and let us just stick within the
What's your
rules
ruling,
already.
please, Madam Speaker?
She said that no application was made, which is true, no application was made for the document. But where did the document come from? Where did you get the document?
Madam Speaker, this document was circulated to all of the members with this resolution. I quoted it. I never said it's an official document from the Access Committee. I said that as the one appointed by Honorable Hector to produce something on safety, I thought it important to do something, and I did it and shared it. So whatever you want to call it, it's still a document, and the evidence is what matters. She didn't even wait to hear the point I was going to make because I was supporting her to show her. So you didn't even let me make the point. You stopped me right there.
Go proceed,
Okay, let's
Honorable
go.
Romeo.
Let's go. Madam Speaker, the document here. Please give the Speaker, maybe she hasn't. You have one? Please give Honorable Hector that. Because perhaps she didn't read it. The first page speaks about the need for a new airport location, points of locations. So she said that this resolution should have been speaking about a new airport location. The report that I presented carefully did that. Madam Speaker, the report refers to the evidence that ASSI supports. The danger of the Twin Otter losing an engine on takeoff and its lack of performance at night. But the other document that you're not allowing us to quote says something that I can't quote. Because you say I can't quote it. Because she quoted it, and she doesn't realize what she quoted. Madam Speaker, I'm correcting some things. Because Honorable Hector clearly did not get advice from her technical people who understand the substance of what here, or she would not make 90% of the statements she's made today. 90% she would not make. Because she was making the point that there's a danger, particularly at night, which means there's a danger in the daytime. We are speaking about day and night med evacuation. So, Madam Speaker, I'm advising Honorable Hector to go back to her technical staff and take her time to study the 2 aircraft accidents that I spoke about and get her facts right. Let me move on. Madam Speaker, at no point did I ever say that the government is not doing anything. Never. Honorable Osborne and Honorable Hector alluded to the fact They said it as if, whatever they said, that I'm suggesting that they're not doing anything. No. Not doing enough? No. This resolution is about doing more, taking more urgent action, interim action between now and when you come up with the permanent solution that you're working on, which I've already commended you for working on. Even that is late. 6 months after Honorable Hector described all of the things that needed to be done, Honorable Hector never once in a speech told us of an alternative aircraft that they've agreed to. She's never told us of a time frame in which they hope to have Medivac. So the country is still wondering, we're going to leave here wondering. Honorable Lewis knows nothing. Honorable Montserrat knows nothing. We're going to leave here with no idea from the government that Medivac will be in place in 6 months, a year, 3 months. We don't know.
You're wrapping up, right?
Madam Speaker, you want to stop me already?
No, I'm not stopping you. What? I'm saying it's not a presentation again. It's
Madam Speaker, you have to tell me what to do. Good gracious. Madam Speaker, please. Honorable Hector spoke for longer than me.
Let us go on. I'm not talking about the length
I have a
of time.
responsibility, Madam Speaker, to refer to things they mentioned, correct what they said wrong, however long it takes. So please, Madam Speaker, let me proceed. Six months ago, Honorable Hector described what needed to be done. Nowhere in her statements has she said which of the things have been completed. Nowhere in her speech has she spoken to or responded to the point I made that I'm told by an official that the islander is still being considered. Still being considered. Madam Speaker, I do my work. I don't just come here and talk. I am sure if she will check, she will find that for the past 2 to 3 years, it's being considered and pushed. But someone in their wisdom came out of their mouth and told me a few months ago that they're still planning to use the islander. So that's what I'm talking about, a conspiracy, people. Wake up and smell the coffee. Something is wrong. So please, my Honourable Speaker, I'm asking Honourable Hector and others to please go and do your checking. Check carefully and find out whether this is true or not. I'm not afraid to deal with it, and they're going to force me. But I know you won't allow it now. So, Madam Speaker, the issues being discussed today is, will you take action over the next day or two to put an interim solution in place? Please don't let me repeat that to you guys. When you vote, that is what the vote is about. Now, whether Don Romeo stopped it, not whether Don Romeo appointed anybody or whatever, it's about that. And I know that Honorable Dr. Buffon, I must stand firmly on this for her good. Madam Speaker, there was mention that social services and the department responsible for assisting people with Medivac never turn anybody down. And, you know, I've had to deal with social services. They're under a lot of stress. I can't imagine how the doctors and the social services, when they have to make a decision on where to send somebody, and they know the cost and they know the budget available, it's not easy. But Honorable Buffon, on December 2025, this is what you said. Could the Honourable Minister tell this House why citizens, residents, and visitors are not charged the full cost of medical care when assessing casualty services locally? Why we're not charged the full cost when accessing local casualty services, and why you're required to assume financial responsibility for medevac overseas, medical treatment, and associated hospital fees when referred abroad for urgent and life-saving specialist care unavailable on island. So you don't pay the full cost for casualty, but you're expected to sign, to commit to tens of thousands of dollars. That is what this debate is about. And Honorable Osborne, a resolution states facts. I gave you evidence to back facts. It doesn't ask questions. You have a problem with that?
Point of order, Madam Speaker.
I'm sorry, what is your point of order?
Madam Speaker, the honourable member is misrepresenting what we have said, and I'd just like to clarify for the honourable member that if he's saying that the resolution states facts, it cannot be a fact that the government chooses which airline or can stipulate which airline flies in Montserrat. And all we're simply saying to him is not that we don't support him in principle, but we cannot support the resolution as it is drafted because there are some things in the resolution that are actually not factual. That is all we're simply saying to the honourable member, Madam Speaker.
Recognize the Honourable
Thank you,
Romeo.
Madam Speaker. It's good to let people talk. So let me just answer that because it was a point of order. The resolution states it calls upon the governments of Montserrat and United Kingdom, together with the government of Montserrat and ACFT and ASI, to consider the need to urgently address the known safety and operational concerns associated with the Britain-Norman BN2 Islander aircraft serving Montserrat. Who did I say should do that? Governments of Montserrat and the United Kingdom, together with Governor of Montserrat and ASIF and ASI. I never said the government of Montserrat should do it. Obviously, we have to work together to do that. So let me finish. You want a response, sir? You want to stop me again?
Honourable Romeo, continue, please.
Yes. I have to respond to him. Madam Speaker, and to identify, assess, and publicly report on the aircraft type or types capable of providing the highest practical levels of safety, reliability, affordability, adequacy, resilience, and operational suitability for Montserrat circumstances, including the provision of safe and continuous day and night medical, day and night. To identify, I'm calling on the government of Montserrat and the United Kingdom, together with the government of Montserrat, the governor of Montserrat, and ASI, to consider. What does consider mean? To consider. Does that in any way suggest that you have to do something? Madam Speaker, please tell Honourable Osborne not to put the resolution in an AI, what do they call it? One of them AI thing, and ask for a rebuttal and just come up with points. Because if he goes to AI, they will tell him that what he's saying is not correct. Nowhere in this other resolution am I asking the government of Montserrat to make a decision. It says consider and not on their own. That's number one. So thank you. So let me go back to what I was saying with Dr. Buffon, which I was disturbed from saying. Could the Honourable Minister of Health explain to this Honourable House why citizens, residents, and visitors are not charged the full cost of medical care when assessing casualty services locally, yet are required to assume financial responsibility for medevac, overseas medical treatment, and associated hospital fees when referred abroad for urgent and life-saving specialist care unavailable on Montserrat? This is the answer from Honourable Dr. Buffon. This is a very good question, Honourable Romeo. I suppose it's because the cost of medical care overseas is too expensive for the government of Montserrat. Did you hear that? So they asked to commit because it's too expensive for the government of Montserrat. But if the government of Montserrat cannot afford it, how can the people afford it? Are you guys listening? Madam Speaker, did you hear that? I do my work I may be emotional now because I'm upset. You know? Very upset. You know how many sleepless nights I went through to provide this? Madam Speaker, please advise them to read what they have before they come here to do a secondary school debate. Then the Honourable Minister makes a very important point that I support fully. This is even more relevant as it pertains to children and persons over the age of 60 years. The Public Health Act obligates me as minister to, and without limiting the generality of, and then she says, unfortunately it assumes I am male, his functions shall include the prevention, treatment, limitation, and suppression of disease. Let me take out a comment and read it. The Public Health Act obligates me as minister to, she's mixed up the quote because she's added her words in between. So she's saying, I don't know how to even present this. The Public Health Act obligates me as minister to, and without limiting the generality of, functions shall include the prevention, treatment, limitation, and suppression of disease. She's quoting the law. I would like to return attention to Section 7.1 of the Public Health Act, which states, except as a minister may otherwise direct, the chief medical officer shall discharge the functions conferred on the minister under this act. Shall discharge the functions conferred on the minister in this act. And then she said, I must ask, Madam Speaker, that the question be put to the Premier and Governor, if on finally getting into this ministry, if my powers as minister have been inadvertently taken away, and if it is well and truly that the chief medical officer is acting on my behalf, supported by the governor, so that the vote of the people to have me fight for them in health is well and truly not. Madam Speaker, that is the kind of stress the Honourable Minister is under. And I'm glad she's appointed, and I'm hoping she's going to go the distance. Here is she saying, she's wondering if she's in charge. You know, or is it somebody else working with the governor and the premier? If it is, Madam Speaker, then there is really no point to me being here when my parents sit in the UK. I want to get into that. Madam Speaker, then she says, it further answers, boy, I tell you, you guys don't know. You don't know. The truth, Madam Speaker, is powerful. She goes on to say, in further answering the question posed by Honourable Romeo, we can further explore what our laws obligate the government of Montserrat to do. Certainly, on Guernsey in the Channel Islands, a more advanced civilization, the cost of medical evacuation is covered by the government of Guernsey. She's saying they need to do exactly for us what is being done for the more civilized. We are not civilized. The resolution speaks to that, Madam Speaker. That's what we're voting on. And members, do you have the courage to say that we need to call on the British government to do something about that with greater urgency? That's what this resolution is about. Madam Speaker, Honourable Hector made another huge mistake. She said that when the people got killed in 1997, I'm trying to regurgitate what she said, that it wasn't for lack of rules or restrictions to stop people from being in those areas that they got killed. Madam Speaker, being a woman of law, I am no lawyer. I would suggest to her that she looks at the court rulings regarding what happened, something that parallels what's happening right here. quoted from the evidence and conclusions of the inquiry by the British magistrate and jury into the death of 18 persons on June 25, 1997, when Montserrat's volcano produced a massive and fatal eruption. The conclusions of the jury as to the death of 11 persons, namely, and it starts with Alistair Joseph, age 3 months, Alicia Joseph, female, age 23, that's the mother, Joseph Simon Chewit, age 45, Reuben Boatsman, age 66, airport worker. Death was caused by the natural catastrophe of volcanic eruption, pyroclastic surge. A contributory cause of death was the continued operation of the airport despite the elevated volcanic activity in the days immediately preceding June 25, 1997. Madam Speaker, I produced this information in 2005. In this document that I gave is the letter from the scientists warning the authorities to close down the airport, literally, that in a minute and a half, without any warning, the airport could be wiped out. And this letter was given to the authorities 16 days before the people got killed. And you're going to see the connection between that and what's happening now. They waited 16 days, did nothing. Why? Honorable Hickson spoke about restricting the islander right now will create problems for us. Isn't that what you said? Well, sir, they didn't shut down the airport because shutting down the airport would shut down air travel altogether. Should they have shut down the airport? Should they have shut the airport to save lives and find an immediate solution? How old are you, Honorable Hickson? How old is Honorable Hickson, Madam Speaker? Was he on Montserrat? Please try and remember, immediately after people got killed, the airport had to be shut down. And guess what? Helicopters, twin-engine helicopters came to our rescue. The military from Britain came in. They could have done it before the airport was. These 4 people whose lives could have been saved. There would be no airport operation. And guess what? Had the pyroclastic flow, I'm going to share this letter with the Honorable House, which is going to need to be discussed. Because during the scientific meetings they had down here, the truth was never told by none of them standing on the platform. This is the truth. The scientists were scared for their own lives. Imagine the scientists telling them, listen, our lives are in danger, having to work here to give the impression that the airport is safe. So they were still working there frightened. They weren't allowed to go to the toilet. They had to keep watching the volcano just in case something happens. So, Madam Speaker, it's the same situation today. Guess who nearly lost their lives? The governor was landing when the pyroclastic flow was coming down. Had the pyroclastic flow crossed the bridge, he'd have been a dead man, along with airport workers, taximen, passengers, plane and passenger. If it had come down, Madam Speaker, these truths need to be told. What we're doing here right now is exactly the same thing. We don't want to stop the islander because they're going to mash up. They will find helicopters. They will use SVG. They will use Winair. They will use Twin Otters. Once we present the case and show that lives can be lost, the British government will act. The Guadeloupe government, I guarantee you, they're going to say, no, man, if Britain don't do it, we're going to do it. So if you want to send me to Guadeloupe and see if I don't come back with something before the end of the week, send me. We have a budget, right? We could use our budget. And I will go. And I must come back with an answer for you, Honorable Dr. Buffon. So you said you didn't have my support before? You have it now. Will you vote with me? That's all right. That's all right. You know, Madam Speaker, the people are listening, you know. That's why I tell you, there's a conspiracy that's allowed to continue, and I don't want to be responsible. That's why this resolution is calling for a clear answer. to what aircraft is safe for day and night medical evacuation. No, God forbid, and I'm praying to God, please don't let it happen. Don't prove those people who want to wait for 3 months wrong. Please don't prove them wrong. That's why no matter what you throw at me today, I still am going to tell you that this resolution is asking for something you need to support. I guarantee you, the people out there who voted for us want you to vote to say we need to have more urgency in addressing this. The pastor, a contractor, police officer, fisherman. I wanted to quote you exactly what they said. A doctor from England texted me and said he's on vacation, and he said, Don, everybody agree what you're saying, except for some people. Madam Speaker, you know, I didn't expect this at all today. So let me try and do what you're anxious for me to do, wrap up. Honorable members, Honorable Speaker, please let the honorable members know that when we vote, if they cannot tell us, cannot tell this House the timeline for when Medivac will be put in place, then you must support Section C, which calls for ABC, calls upon the relevant authorities to consider publishing within a reasonable period a report and timetable setting out the actions proposed, the responsibilities of each organization, the funding agencies, and the target dates for addressing these matters mentioned above. If you can't, none of you did, none of you told us any time frame. So it could be another year. It could be 6 months. It could be 3 months. Nothing. Honorable members, Honorable Madam Speaker, I'm letting them know. If they cannot tell us what aircraft will be used, then you must support this resolution. Because Section B of the resolution calls upon the governments of Montserrat and the United Kingdom, together with the governor of Montserrat and Air Safety Support International, to consider the need to urgently address the known safety and operational concerns associated with the British Norman BN-2 Islander aircraft serving Montserrat, and to identify, assess, and publicly report on the aircraft type or types capable of providing the highest practicable levels of safety, reliability, affordability, adequacy, resilience, and operational suitability for Montserrat circumstances, including the provision of safe and continuous day and night medical evacuation services where feasible, and to give urgent consideration to the measures necessary to ensure such capability for the people of Montserrat. You must. More urgently address. If you cannot assure the people of Montserrat that safe daytime and nighttime medevac is going to be clearly addressed, then you must vote with this resolution. If you cannot assure the public that the kind of assistance Honourable Dorset spoke about from the UK government, which I referred to in my documents, she didn't read it clearly. The gentleman is saying that you have a budget, go deal with what you have to, you have enough. And he's saying he's fulfilling his responsibilities. So if it's not being fulfilled, it's you not fulfilling your responsibilities. That's what it says. I read it, a trap. And guess what he says? He fulfills all of their responsibilities under UN Treaty Article 73, the word people don't want to hear. You know why he has to say that? He can't say anything else. If he says he's not fulfilling them, what does that mean? There are legal consequences. But guess what? This House has a responsibility to carry out the responsibilities of the UK minister. So if the money is not enough, you're supposed to tell him, sir, you're not fulfilling all your responsibilities because I can't fulfill them. You said so to the UK Parliament, but it's not true because we can't fulfill them. We're forcing poor people to pay $70,000, $140,000 bills. They're stressed while they're sick. Madam Speaker, there's only one thing I want to defend myself from. And Honorable Fong is not here. I want to say this very quietly. PDM never stopped any hospital, new build hospital project because there was no new build hospital project. There never was one. Did you hear me? There never was a new build hospital project. And I won't get into it now, but there never was. People are being fooled. There never was. All right, I will provide. Okay. Anyway, that's not the issue today. That's not the issue today. The truth is, and I stated, Honorable Dr. Buffon, and I respect you, plenty.
Address the chair, please.
Yes, Madam Speaker. If you cannot tell this House the timeline for medical evacuation, when it will be in place, you must support this. If you cannot tell us what aircraft will be used, you must support this. If you cannot reassure the public that safe daytime and nighttime medevac will be put in place more urgently than it is being put in place right now, in the next few days, in the interim, while we wait on the hard work you're doing for the longer-term permanent solution. If you can't do that, I urge you to support this resolution. Don't look at me. Look at the facts. Look at the truth. Think about the youth who are in here. Any one of them may need medevac at night. Who we and come to see? Think about them. Think about the governor. Think about ASI who even comes to visit. Think about yourself. Think about every woman and child in Montserrat who voted for us or didn't vote for us. Madam Speaker, I need not say one word more. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you. Now, honorable members, it has been moved and seconded that the resolution calling on the governments of Montserrat and the United Kingdom to take immediate and urgent action to address safety concerns associated with the Britten-Norman BN-2 Islander aircraft and to ensure safe, affordable, reliable, and continuous day and night medical evacuation services, services for the people of Montserrat should be approved. Those in favor, say aye. Those against, nay.
Madam Speaker.
I'll go over that again. Those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those against, nay.
Nay.
I think the nays have it.
I'd like to call for a division, please.
Certainly. Madam Clerk?
Nay.
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 Nay. Nay.
Aye.
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 So we have 3 ayes and 6 nays.
The result of the division, 3 ayes and 6 nays, which means that the resolution calling on the governments of Montserrat and the United Kingdom to take immediate and urgent action to address safety concerns associated with the Britain-Norman BN2 Islander aircraft and to ensure safe, affordable, reliable, and continuous day and night medical evacuation services for the people of Montserrat has not been approved.
Other business, adjournment.
I recognize the Honorable Deputy Premier.
Madam Speaker, I rise to ask for an adjournment, sine die, of this Honourable House.
I recognize the Honorable Minister of Agriculture.
Madam Speaker, I rise to second the adjournment of this Honourable House.
It has been moved and seconded that this Honourable House should stand adjourned, sine die. All those in favor say aye. All those against, nay. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. This Honourable House now stands adjourned, sine die.